Canopa. Folden. Olson.
Here.
Summers.
Here.
Kellum.
Here.
Langyar.
Here.
Kapczynski.
Here.
Coburn.
Here.
Johnson. Here. Thompson.
Okay, Ed?
I guess we're on here. So we're back with the agency budget, responding to a question that was raised at the last meeting. And with that, I'm just going to simply turn it over to Stuart, who has the answers. I think it's on. You just have to pull to about 8 inches.
You have to hit it harder. Okay, we'll try that.
No, that didn't work.
It's not on.
See if that works.
Okay. Pretty sure it was this thing.
Stereo.
The issue that was identified last week in our discussion was there were loan proceeds from the streetscape project in the CARA budget that were being included in materials and services, and as a result, those proceeds were being identified as operating costs, which overstated in the central service charge. The budget proceeds or the loan proceeds for the streetscape project appear in the current year budget and in the proposed budget. So what's before you on the dais this evening is a corrected budget that would show the adjustment to the operating cost by moving that charge down to capital. In the current year, that will be addressed more specifically at the end of the year in June, when the City Council would consider a supplemental budget. If there's a need for additional charges, those would be made then in order to offset the budgeted or the inflated charges identified in the budget for central service charge in this budget. And then in the proposed budget, that's offset by the beginning balance in the central service fund. So the budget and the resolution that are on the dais reflect those changes for next year's budget.
So, question. I thought when we talked about this last week that this was the easy fix, and the hard fix was that other departments' central services charges should have actually been higher. Is that correct?
And that's what I'm suggesting that be the approach for the current year budget. So we'll identify where we end up at June 30th in the credit that is made back to the CARA budget in the current year. And if there's a need for additional charge, those charges would be implemented in each of the operating budget, and that would be part of the supplemental budget that the City Council would consider in June. Going forward into next year's budget, the intermediate or fix that I'm suggesting this evening is that we offset it in the beginning balance rather than changing all of the operating budgets in next year's budget, because a budget is a planning document and we don't know what that number will be. It will very likely be less than what the budget number would be. And so if needed in next year, it would require an adjustment at year end as well.
So I think that's what you said the first time, the second time I was listening. So.
Oh.
Move to approve the resolution?
Second.
Discussion.
Okay, do we have a motion for to approve the resolution?
And a second.
And a second.
Second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the resolution. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Do we have any opposed? Okay, it's passed. Thank you.
And that's it for the agency budget.
Business from the
I
committee.
don't have the agenda. Yeah.
Okay.
Should we wait, or do we ask for the resolution for the CARA budget now?
We just
Okay,
we did, yeah.
that's all signed out. All right. I'm making sure I understand everything.
Kara takes care of Kara.
Yeah, so
Okay,
thank you. So for the, to assist with the direction of the meeting. At this point, there's no further business for the CARA budget.
Okay.
And so the chair is welcome to adjourn
Okay.
the CARA meeting, and then we'll close that meeting out, and then we'll begin the budget committee meeting.
Okay. Well, I guess that's adjourned then. Okay, I'll call to order the May 4th Budget Committee meeting. Roll call.
Sykes,
Yo.
Vernig,
Yeah.
Pearson, Keller,
Here.
Canopa, Folden, Olson,
Here.
Summers,
Here?
Kellum,
Here.
Langyar,
Here.
Kopsinski,
Here.
Coburn,
Here.
Johnson. Here. Thompson.
Here.
And Madam Chair, if I could mention that Scott Pearson, Sharon Canopa, and Sue Folden have been excused,
Okay.
requested to be excused, and may show up later in one case.
Okay, do we have any public comment? Okay. Then we need to adopt the April 4th minutes of the CIP joint work session, Planning Commission and Budget Committee. Do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Seconded.
Okay, moved and seconded to approve the April 4th minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Okay. Then I guess we're ready for Parks and Rec review.
And we're off. Thank you very much for allowing me to present the proposed budget for the next fiscal year. The format for my presentation will be very similar to what some of you have witnessed in previous years. The numbers have been changed to protect the innocent. But I wanted to start off by just stating that this is my 12th, I think. I've been here 13 years, so this is my 12th budget to be presented. And I get to present, but a lot of folks behind me actually do most of the work in preparing this budget. So I wanted to acknowledge a few of my staff. These are the managers and supervisors in the department. Katie Nushazar is going to wave from the very back table. She likes to sit in the back. I have Rick Barnett and Gary Carlson, both handling different aspects of park maintenance for us, and lots of other duties besides. And Rob Romancier is back there somewhere. He's the quiet one until he gets into the pool, and then he's very noisy. And Debbie Little is our administrative assistant, and none of this happens without Debbie backing us all up. So, did I miss anybody, guys? All right, thank you. So anyway, I just wanted to acknowledge their efforts because this is the easy part of the job. So, just to get started here, just a reminder of sort of the mission of the Parks and Recreation Department. It's really twofold. We try to be good stewards of the properties and the facilities that you charge us to take care of. And then we also, with our activities, our events, our recreation programs, and so forth, try to promote healthy activity and healthy living through recreational opportunities. And I would add to recreation cultural opportunities, educational opportunities, because you sort of roll all those things into some of the activities that we actually deliver to the community. A little bit of detail on what the department does. There are several areas of service. Obviously, we're property managers, and we take care of or maintain those properties as well. We've got 36 properties in our inventory that are designated as park or and/or open space. About 895 acres total in that inventory. About half of that is conservation area, with maybe some trails running through them, but generally not developed to the extent that a neighborhood park would be. So about half of the system on the flip side are facilities and neighborhood park type facilities that require a much more intensive maintenance activity. We have, as I suggested, 9 miles of trails in the city. Some of those are paved, some of them aren't. The Dave Clark Path is an example along the riverfront. Periwinkle Path, some people don't know that path, runs north and south along Periwinkle Creek, south of 9th Avenue. And then, of course, we take care of certain landscapes within the street right-of-way. Some of you may or may not be aware of that. And finally, we sort of assumed by default some of the landscapes in the downtown area. And of course, with the new streetscape project about ready to launch, we'll assume some additional tree maintenance and landscape maintenance as well. Speaking of trees, we've got about 14,000 and counting trees that are in the public right-of-way. These are not the trees that are in the parks. And so we have a rotation, an annual rotation of areas where we maintain street trees on a cycle. We can't take care of them all in 1 year, so we look at different areas every 3 years. We are a Tree City USA. I'm not going to explain what that means. What it means is that the city has committed resources to taking care of public trees over the long haul, and we've been a Tree City USA now for 23 years and counting. Probably what we're best known for, quite frankly, are our community festivals and events. We are known nationally and regionally. We've received awards on the national scale for what we do in this area. Katie Nushazar, in particular, is our leader in these efforts, and so I want to again give her due credit for that. Northwest Art and Air, River Rhythms, Mondays in Monteith, which now is Summer Sounds as of about 2 years ago. And many other smaller events that might draw fewer people but are no less important to the community. Those events, the major events, attract about 140,000 people each year. And the numbers are going up, and I'll share another factoid with you in just a little bit to illustrate that. The last time we actually did exit polls at Northwest Art and Air and at the pools and then also at the ball fields, we estimated about a $4 to $5 million economic impact, direct impact related to those events. That's money coming into the community from people that don't live in the community, whether it's spent on lodging or meal money or other expenditures. Those estimates came from the people that actually were interviewed.
Let me ask, how did
Yes,
you
sir.
can I ask, how did you do that?
Well, we had folks doing surveys at Northwest Art and Air, and I don't remember, Mitch, how many we collected. I have that data in the file, which we could share with you at some point. It's been several years, and we'd like to be doing it more frequently than that, but we haven't done it in several years. But these numbers are based on those numbers that we generated way back then, several years ago. So I would think it's safe to guess that those numbers are higher, but I don't have a hard number for you. Recreational, educational, arts, and cultural experiences that we deliver to the community as well. You see some of those listed there. Building maintenance is one that maybe some of you don't know that we are also responsible for. They're not in the Parks and Recreation Department budget in Fund 202. They're in a separate fund, but we are responsible for the management, and we're responsible for those employees and the scheduling of activities and so forth. And so currently we have 19 city buildings and their related grounds. There will be 2 more, one police and 1 fire station added to the inventory in the near future. Yay. And so currently we have about 300,000 square feet of buildings, and that excludes the 2 new stations that we have some responsibility for. The new stations, for example, I know that the police station will be handling their own custodial through their own budget, but there will be other building maintenance activities, repairs and elevator service and things like that, that building maintenance will coordinate. I mentioned Rob back there in the back, the quiet one. We have an aquatics program, the community pool, as well as the outdoor pool that operates during the summer months. And then, of course, we have an array of sports programs as well. And with aquatics and sports, we conservatively estimate, same methodology, Mitch, about $2 million in economic impact. which could be dramatically higher if we had the facilities to draw more tournaments, especially at the softball fields, but we don't at the moment. Some of you probably are aware that we also run City Hall reception and customer service at our front desk. Utility billing is on the other side. They do utility billing, and we do the drop-in visits on our side of the hallway. I think I'll leave it at that. There's another page, but you can read that for yourself. There's really no reason for me to highlight anything other than we provide staff support for 3 city commissions: Parks and Recreation, Tree Commission, and the Arts Commission. And we also provide staff support for the Senior Endowment Committee. But as the budget documents reflect, we will no longer have a senior endowment. We are dissolving that. So that will be a change in the next year's budget. So I'm not caught up on my slides, but you should have slides in front of you, so forgive me. All right, this is where we are. I'm caught up on these slides, not those slides. About 3 years ago, we had about 90 sponsorships that we had developed in the community. We are now up to 190 sponsorships across all of our programs in the city. Some are large, some are small, but it's a big deal to us. Katie and several people in the department spend virtually all year cultivating these relationships, and then once they're cultivated and landed, delivering on what we've promised those sponsors by way of marketing and promotional materials and signage and just tender loving care when they're at Northwest Art and Air, for example, or River Rhythms. It takes up a lot of our time. As you'll see, it's a fairly small percentage of our budget, but it's an extremely critical portion of our budget, as we'll share in just a moment. Gifts and donations, cash and in-kind services are conservatively estimated for this next budget year at about $540,000. That number will go up. It's already at $540,000 for extending into the next year. So it's going to go up. The only question is, what are we going to be at the end of the fiscal year?
Question?
Yes, sir.
Has anyone reached out to Winco yet?
I don't know. Kitty?
We made an initial effort, but we have not connected yet.
Great.
If you know somebody, use them.
I do.
Okay, I'd love to have
I'll be talking to him at the end of the month.
Perfect, Rich, thank you. Yeah, we keep a real good track on the businesses that are coming in, but we don't always have direct contacts and know who to work with. So that helps appreciate it. The other thing I wanted to mention is that I think you can combine the number of volunteer hours in the city outside of Parks and Recreation, and it wouldn't approach the 38,000 that we secure on average every year. And if we had to pay that 38,000 hours, we'd be looking at about $1 million, $900 to $1 million worth of staff that we'd have to go hire somewhere. We have 31 FTE, as you'll see a little bit. This amounts to another 18 FTE that we're not paying for, that people are paying us essentially with their time to contribute to our events and our programs.
Ed?
Yes, sir.
With the senior endowment going away, do you perceive, and I'm maybe way off base on here, perceive that the foundation may be stepping in to offset some of that?
We have 2 foundations, Ray. There is a senior center foundation as well
Okay.
that was established several years ago.
Okay.
That money
That's the
will
one
roll
that's
in,
money.
that endowment money will roll into the foundation there
Okay.
and not into the new Parks and Recreation Foundation, which we just established. I generally am trying to convey to you that I think the community gets its money's worth, and we'll look at expenditures again in just a little bit. But we've got about 31 FTE in this next year's budget. That's about 0.6 FTE per 1,000 residents. That's significantly below our national peer group average. We also secure cash donations that amounted this past year to about $8 per capita. There have been some years when we exceeded $11 per capita. I expect that number to go up again this year, this next fiscal year. Our peer group on average is about 75 cents per capita. So we're darn good at doing this. Katie especially and her crew are very good at this. We've been at it a long time. We know what we're doing, and we're recognized nationally for that. I think it's important for our public to realize we're not just coming to the taxpayer. We're working very hard year-round to secure non-tax resources to make sure that the services are delivered. Typical capital project leverages city money at greater than 3 to 1. When we go out and get a grant, we usually have to pledge a minimum of a match, dollar for dollar. Typically, it's higher than that. In some cases, the grant match is 80-20 to us, 20 to us, 475, 25. So those percentages work in our favor. And it means that our capital money, which is very low, very precious, gets extended dramatically through grants and other contributions. By the way, 2/3 of all the work that we perform in the recreation side, in the park maintenance side, is done by contractors or jail crews or someone other than city employees. So that's pretty efficient in my view. I don't need to go over this except to say the last online survey the city did reported favorably, our citizens reported favorably on what they thought about the services that we offer. So, I got to go back, sorry, clicked one too many times. Come on, go back. All right, we're not going to go back.
You can use my shoe.
Yeah, well, you know what, I'm just going to wing it here. In 2010, right, you know, in order to do this, there's always a higher level of demand, and in a growing community, a higher level of demand, and it always stretches way beyond what you're able to pay for. You'd like to be able to spend more money delivering these services, but that's not going to be possible. So the question is, how do you manage the resources that you do have in the most effective way possible? In 2010, at kind of the low ebb of city resources, we eliminated 6 full-time positions that year. That was a 19% reduction in our staffing back then. Over the intervening years, we've managed to reestablish some of those positions. We're still going to be shy with this next budget about 3 positions from our 2010 level. We haven't quit doing anything. We're just doing things differently, and quite frankly, our people are working even harder than they were working back in 2010. The point is that we're doing very well as we can with the resources that we have. Personnel expenditures in our budget this next year comprise just 33% of the total Parks and Recreation expenditure budget. That compares quite favorably with other types of operations in the city. It also compares quite favorably with our peer groups nationally. So once again, we do business the right way here, and I'm really proud of that. One of the things that we did over the intervening years, because money was just not, we didn't have excess, let's put it that way. We've eliminated most of the capital project funding that we used to have in the budget. We used to spend on average about $300,000 to $400,000 out of the park fund. We don't spend anything like that now, unless it's an SDC funded project, or unless we've managed to leverage some of our park funds with grant funds. Then we'll spend more than that.
And I have a
Yes.
question. Sometimes in the summer, they have concerts on Mondays. Do the Parks Department have anything to do with those?
Yes, we do Mondays, we do Thursdays, River Rhythms. So
Okay.
Mondays are called Summer Sound.
Oh, so, okay.
And so, yes, we're going to be doing that again this year. Since 2006, we've increased our park acreage by more than 50%. And remember, I told you that we are 3 FTEs shy of what we had in 2010. So we're managing the additional acreage with fewer people. Our attendance at summer events has almost doubled since 2005. That's quite significant, because to double the participation means that we have to invest more heavily either through volunteers or other city resources to accommodate all those guests. We've improved the Fund 202, that's the Parks and Recreation Fund, cost recovery, through a very aggressive pursuit of grants, fees, sponsorships, and donations, as I've been sharing with you in this presentation. Okay, now the proposed budget. We operate in 3 funds. I'm going to only really talk about the first one, the Fund 202. Within those 3 funds, we operate 13 distinct programs, and your budget documents reflect those programs. Pie chart here that shows the revenues and where the revenues come from for this next budget year. Property taxes account for about 49% of the total revenue we'll be taking in or projecting for this next year. By the way, that I guess it was 13 years ago that I got here, that number was close to 75%. So there have been quite a few changes since then. You'll see the next largest number is beginning balance. One way we manage within the fund is we make sure that where we can avoid spending in a fiscal year, we save money, we carry that money forward. It's a special revenue fund, and so the money that's banked in the Parks and Recreation Fund stays within the Parks and Recreation Fund. So if we can save, those savings then become a part of the beginning balance for the next year. Another form of savings, in effect, from one year to the next, any excess revenue beyond what we projected to collect in a given fiscal year, that is also banked and carried forward as part of the beginning balance in the next year. 28% is just about as high as, I think it is as high as it's ever been in the 13 years that I've been here.
Okay, Ed?
Yes,
Do you have an asterisk by property taxes? The asterisk references,
Yeah, that's an errant keystroke. I didn't mean to do that. Sorry, I didn't even catch it. All right, the next slide is how we break down expenditures. In those 13 programs, we have what we call our core or operating programs, and examples of those would be park maintenance, adult services, which includes the senior center, aquatics, and so forth. Those are programs 1402 through 1414, skipping a couple of numbers. There are also what we call self-supporting programs. Those would be park SDCs, that's 1500, park CIP, that's 1507, and 1418, which is the Senior Center Foundation, Ray. We talked about that just a little while ago. Those are self-supporting because within the Parks and Recreation Fund, those programs generate and keep revenue within their own functions. By the way, if you want to see where I got the numbers, the 7412900 under operating programs, that total for next year comes from page 55 in your budget document. So if you're looking for those numbers, you'll find it. And if you need more detail, I'll be glad to share that with you. So I'll end with maybe some challenges. There are many. Many of those challenges relate to an aging park system. Facilities are getting older. Some facilities that are still operating are 45 years or more old, and they haven't been fixed, they haven't been replaced, and so the clock is ticking on some of those assets. About $17 million is really needed just to implement some of the projects that were identified in the last park master plan in 2006. And yes, we are updating the plan this year with some of the work that's being done with the University of Oregon Sustainable City Year program. Sunrise Park renovation is the only park capital project right now in the CIP and in the budget. And that's been going on for a few years now. We finally got our permits from, I don't know, the 1,300 agencies that we had to get permits from. And we're there, and we're moving forward with design, and we'll be meeting with the community shortly.
You mean the city parks has to get permits from other cities?
You know what? We have to do the same
agencies.
thing anyone on the private side has to do. Maybe some folks don't realize that either. You know, for years now, I've been talking about not just the capital items that are in the park master plan. I've also been talking about this growing list of what I call deferred maintenance, repair and replacement projects. Things as small as replacing sections of sidewalk throughout the park system to replacing entire lighting systems or irrigation systems that might be 30, 40 years old. Those all cost money. The money hasn't been there. One thing that, a new initiative in this budget is a brand-new program. It's 1520, and we're calling it the Park Repair and Construction Unit. Gary Carlson, as the supervisor, is heading that up this next year. And we're using this as a strategy to keep some of our personnel and resources focused on just the repair and upkeep, trying to chip away at this $3 million plus backlog that we've got. We finally realized that what we've got to do is organize around this as a focus area if we're going to make any headway. And so we've dedicated personnel, four people to this unit. They moved from park maintenance to this new unit, so we didn't create any new positions for this purpose. We are giving, in this next budget, Gary about $200,000 for materials and services, and this is outside of any grant-funded or capital project that we have otherwise identified. This is just the little stuff, repairing sidewalks, replacing pieces of playgrounds and things like that. We're hoping that this will help us at least begin to make a dent in that backlog inventory and maybe stop the bleeding, if you will, because we were actually seeing an increase of about $100,000 a year in terms of our backlog costs.
Did you say 1420?
Yeah, you said
Fif- I-
15.
You said 15.
I said 1520?
It's 14.
Yep.
It's
I believe it's
1420, I'm
14,
sorry.
yes.
Yes, thank you.
That's right.
The reason I couldn't find it.
Yeah, sorry about that. Just a couple more things. We've, as I referred to earlier with Ray, we've launched a new Parks and Recreation Foundation. They're the ones that are collecting resources and managing the resources for the Waverly Duck Restoration effort, for example. This is really their first project. We'll be working over the next year to activate the foundation and help them get organized around larger fundraising efforts than that.
Just a quick update on that. We hit the goal on the GoFundMe site. It says $5,000 as of this afternoon. By the time this is all said and done, we'll have, with prior commitments that have been made, we'll have $6,000 to $7,000 in that for the foundation to use for the duck O&M and repair and refurbishment, so.
And I wanted to thank the mayor and thank the councilor also for their efforts. They really led the charge on this, and I just worked with the foundation to try to find a place to put it.
Something different for a change.
Yes.
A duck.
In this community.
We need a beaver now.
I know.
I do want a beaver.
We'll have extra money.
Wait until I retire, okay? Please, please.
I haven't updated you. There is someone, that organization wanting to do a beaver.
Oh.
Yeah, but we no longer have the phone guy.
You just accelerated my retirement date. Thank you. The last bullet point here is, as I mentioned earlier, we've been working all school year with the Sustainable City Year program, and some of you may not know what that is. We can share more information with you afterwards. The counselors know what the program is. We're getting lots of ideas, lots of suggestions, lots of reports out of these classes over the school year. Some of them will relate to operating costs. Some of them will relate to new strategies to raise revenue for capital that we don't have currently. Some of them are working on the two foundations to try to figure out how we can be more successful with the foundations. Some of them are looking at our business practices to see if there's a way to be even more efficient than we are already. And with that, I'm ready for questions.
Any questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, with the school district talking about working on the swimming pool at South?
Yes.
Is that going to materially change our expenses and/or amount of time we have it available, or they have it available, or, it is a particular pet project of mine to, in thinking of when the city of Albany taxpayer pays for something, we pay all of it. When the school district pays for it, that same thing, where it's a school district thing, the city of Albany pays, the taxpayer in the city of Albany pays about 70%. So it's my concern that those do not get blurred.
Okay.
I mean, how much they get to use it, how much we get to use it,
Okay.
and, you know.
You know what I'd like to do is bring Rob Romancier up, or Rob, do you have a mic back there? Okay, Rob, would you come up?
Well, he's not going to be quiet now.
No, far too quiet.
You're the man of mine.
It shows that it's on, but it's not.
It's on.
I think it's on there.
Yeah.
Hello there. Yes, no, working?
Yes.
There you go.
Okay,
Yes.
get close enough.
There you go.
So my understanding is that there's about $1 million of the bond that is going to go toward the pool. They're looking at, it's a 38-year-old facility, and it's never had really anything done for it. If you look at Osborne Aquatic Center, they're at about $6-some-odd million. They were built about the same time. So what they're looking at is upgrading the HVAC unit and doing some things around the pool area, installing new boilers and some things like that. So there is a list. I didn't know it was going to be brought up today, but I could, of what they are planning to do. They get 700 hours. It's a lease. They get 700 hours a year to use the facility. All the rest of the time is used by the community. Those hours, the 700 hours, is used by the water awareness program. It's used by the swim teams, the water polo teams. We have athletes who come over mostly from South Albany, because it's right there on campus, and rehab and do things like that. So we track all of that.
Is the outside users, I understand there are folks from inside of town and folks from outside of town?
90-some-odd% are inside of town.
My concern would be, once again, if the people who use it are paying the cost, what our cost is, it's no big deal. If the taxpayer is subsidizing that to any great extent, then the people inside of town, of course, it's their money, so great, but people outside of town is maybe a little bit of a sore spot. So at some point, if we know, I'd kind of like to know that.
Okay, yeah, I don't see, and they haven't asked for any change in our scheduling or anything like that. So, we open up the building at 5:30 in the morning. We've got lap swimmers there, we've got senior exercisers there, we've got water awareness program there. So and we go until 8 o'clock at night. This weekend we'll be hosting actually starting tomorrow at 4 o'clock, we'll have between 200 and some odd swimmers there from all over the region there for a 3-day swim meet. And we charge the swim club for that. They bring money in to all the different stores and gas stations and stuff like that around a motel room. So we're not looking at any changes at all for usage.
There is also the old TLT committee, new TLT committee, whatever it is. A group of people are meeting with at the chamber from primarily downtown, but also other places, hotels and so forth, to put together, to coordinate the stays in town.
Okay.
I mean, it might not hurt anything. I don't know if the city is a part of that or not.
No, we haven't been invited.
When they get to the point where, they have a real time and energy and thing going on, it might be a good idea to have someone available.
If we knew about it, we'd be there.
Yeah.
So, yes.
I've got all the dates for this next year for swim meets and events, so.
That can
And
be
I know
arranged.
Katie's got the Art and Air Festival and that kind of stuff, so we've got the dates.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ron.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
I think Mitch was first. Go ahead.
Okay,
thank
you
you.
go first.
Yes.
Going back to your budget. okay,
Yes.
There was a piece in it, you said there was a 28% carryover.
Yes, the beginning balance.
Yeah, how are you doing that?
How are we doing that? Well, so the beginning balance is made up of money that we didn't spend in the previous year and any new revenues that we realized, right? So you add those two together, that becomes our beginning balance. Some of that money that comes from the previous year that we wouldn't spend, the contingency money, for example. In administration, we have a contingency, and typically we don't touch it. It's just there, just in case, and so that carries as part of our unspent budget money. You know, there are capital projects that are budgeted. For instance, Sunrise Park, I budgeted, I don't know, about $75,000 or so in this current fiscal year, and it hasn't happened yet. And so whatever we anticipate not spending in that project gets rolled over as an estimate, as part of the estimated beginning balance as well. And then on the revenue side, Mitch, as I said, we work really hard on sponsorships, and so we achieved higher levels of donations and sponsorships in the current fiscal year than we had budgeted, projected, which is a good thing. And so, you know, when we project real revenue, it usually is in excess of our estimated revenue at the beginning of the budget year. We're very conservative when we estimate our revenues, and that's because we don't want to overextend on the expenditure side. So that's how the beginning balance is composed, and there are several line items on the expenditure side, and then there are several on the revenue side that all contribute to that beginning balance, and it just happens to be higher this year than it has been in previous years.
What's it normally?
It's 28% now, and I think last fiscal year, I don't have, if you just give me a minute, maybe I can go to that page.
128.
Which one is it?
128.
128? Thank you. So yeah, if you look at park revenues on page 128, you'll see a brief history of what's been happening with our revenues in general and our beginning balance in particular. So you see that the number is higher than it was the previous year, but it actually compares favorably with what we were carrying forward from the 3 years prior to that. This last year, we budgeted much tighter, and this year we're able to just put a little bit more into the next year's budget. So I hope that's a good enough explanation. If you need more detail, you might want to check in with me.
Okay, go ahead.
Who owns the swimming pool building?
The swimming pool is actually owned by the school district. The pool was built, Dick, when was it built? 38 years ago is what Rob said.
Long time ago.
Long time ago.
Mayor, so it was a long time.
Yeah. That was built with federal revenue sharing money as a grant that came to the city, basically, and the city helped build that facility.
So the city owns the building?
No, the school district owns the building. It's always been under school ownership,
At that time,
and we lease it.
school district was a lot more flush than the city. And we got this big chunk of 3 years of revenue sharing money. And we thought a swimming pool would be just great, and why not build it at South Albany? So we did, and they got it.
Yeah. So, but the status is that we lease it, we don't own it. And our lease calls for us to essentially pay for the costs associated with running the swimming programs, you know, the aquatics programs inside the building. The shell is taken care of by the school district. The systems, it's sort of a shared cost. And of course, the bond program that's proposed would pick up some of those repair and renovation costs related to the building and its systems.
Okay.
Any other
Okay.
questions? Okay, Bessie?
Two things. First thing is, I see the trolley rental charges are going away. And I just wondered, is there a way, if we really fix up the trolley, with the carousel coming downtown, with parking the way it is, you know, it might be increased, you know, people coming. So I just wondered if that's a possibility, to use the trolley as a a vehicle to transport people?
Yeah, and we've zeroed that out because we just haven't been seeing all that much revenue from trolley rentals. Most of the use of the trolley has been either for parks and recreation programs, where we use them as part of our summer activities, for example, or we may on occasion get a request from one of our partnering agencies like the Expo Center or AVA. AVA is the primary agency that uses the trolley. And we don't charge them. Some time ago, TLT funds were dedicated to underwrite the use of the trolley by some of those partners. And so that's the model we're operating on right now. And we just don't see a lot of outside revenue associated with the trolley. So zeroed out, but it doesn't mean that we can't charge. We have a rate that we'll charge.
Okay, and the other thing is, my husband and I have been volunteering to help with senior center, at the senior center, with their monthly lunches and things like that. And there's quite a few volunteers, and I know there's maybe only one or two staff people or whatever and stuff, but I would be remiss in saying that Shirley needs a raise.
Shirley needs a raise?
Shirley needs a raise.
Okay, thank you.
I told her that she needed one, and I says, I will definitely let Ed know.
Thank you very much for doing that.
Shirley needs a raise, because she is one heck of a hard worker.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
No, Shirley.
Shirley.
I don't know what her last name is. All I know is that she works in the kitchen and.
We'll take that into consideration. How's that? Yeah.
Charlotte, okay, she's, I must
Yeah.
have missed, okay, Charlotte, Shirley, whatever her name is, she needs a raise.
I bet she cares.
Okay, Ed, we have one more.
No, that's not fair.
Ed will surely find out.
East Thornton Lake,
Yes.
where's that going? I mean, what's going to happen with it?
Well, you don't see anything in the budget because we're not ready to pull the trigger on anything yet. East Thornton Lake it's really in a planning mode right now. We're working with the U of O classes to come up with different concepts to consider. Those are all on the wall up and down City Hall stairs right now. But the question really becomes, okay, what do we want to pursue? There is money sitting in the Park STC program that was set aside originally for East Thornton Lake. It's still there. We haven't touched it. So if and when we get ready to move forward with that project, we have some money to use as seed, essentially, to pursue more donations and grants. And that's the funding model we'll pursue. But right now, we're just in a planning mode. I guess if I had to guess, we're probably a year away from actually putting anything in front of the Capital Improvements Committee.
Okay,
Very,
Ray?
very small item, Ed, on page 130, under the Sports Services Program.
Yeah.
Item 61030, the personal auto reimbursement, $1,500 for,
Yes, I see it.
is that for you, or is that for?
No. We have right now one FTE in this program. It's our sports coordinator, Bruce Edwards.
Okay.
And he runs around a lot in his personal vehicle on city business. And so that allowance is to cover mileage basically for him.
Okay. He's covering the insurance and
Oh,
all
yeah.
that sort of stuff
Yeah, this
himself?
is just paying back for mileage for use of personal vehicle.
Okay,
This is probably not for you, it's probably more for Stuart. It doesn't really relate specifically to Parks and Recreations. I keep looking at the personnel services in each one of the different packages, and I really like to know what's in employer pay benefits, the pieces to it. It's kind of the same every time, right? I mean, it's parceled out across each one of those the same way, but what's all in it?
So that would include the wages and salaries for employees, as well as
Not hearing your mic.
wages and salaries for employees, as well as the benefits costs. So in personal services, there are several line items, and they differ in the different budgets by what's needed in that budget. Some have temporary employees, some have overtime, some have workers' comp, and at different times, depending on what claims have been filed for workers' comp that may appear or not appear in different budgets. The benefits that are included include all of those that are identified in collective bargaining agreements with the, I think 5 is the number of different bargaining units that the city has. 2, 3, 4 or 5. Have David confirm that. And then life insurance, health insurance, PERS costs, variety of those. Those are the details of those line items.
And that includes that PERS number that's building up because of the baby boomers. Right?
Yes. That number is included in the employer paid benefit line item. Yeah.
Okay,
I do have a question.
okay, go ahead.
Street tree development fees.
Which, the revenue side?
That's on page 127.
Yes.
You've budgeted that you're going to, it's a really manic
Yes. Yes.
fund.
Yeah.
Can you explain that a little bit? I mean,
Well, it all
changes
depends,
so
it all
drastically.
depends on the amount of development activity we see on the street. You know, a few years ago, there wasn't anything going on. This account takes in a fee, I think it's $250 per tree that a development by code requires. And so the developer has a choice. They can pay us that fee and we'll plant it ourselves with our people at the right time, or the developer can plant their own tree at whatever expense they incur. They've got a choice, and they just make that decision as they're going through the process. As you see, the number went up dramatically this last year,
Yeah.
and that's because, you know, there were lots of streets being built and lots of trees that needed to be planted. And so we collected a whole bunch of fees over the last fiscal year. And we are projecting about the same amount this fiscal year. Whether we realize it or not is another question. And Rick, I'm looking for you to support me on this. Okay, that's right. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ed, for your presentation.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Public Works, Community Development.
Evening.
Good evening.
So my name is Jeff Blaine. I'm the Community Development Director, as well as the Public Works Engineering Director. So I'll be providing this presentation and then participating in the one that follows as well. You should be getting passed around here a copy of our PowerPoint presentation in case the screens don't work well for you. Everybody okay with me starting? Okay. So there's two divisions of the Community Development Department. The Planning Division, which is led by our Planning Manager, Bob Richardson. I'll let Bob wave. And Building Division, which is led by our Building Official, Gary Stutzman. Gary and Bob are each responsible for putting their budgets together. So as we get into detailed questions about the line items, they'll help me provide answers as we need them. As a whole, in the Community Development Department, we continue to see strong development activity. It's good news that people are continuing to invest in Albany, but responding to this activity has kept our relatively small staff very busy this year and the previous couple years as well. You'll probably recall that, much like Ed described for parks a few years back during the recession, Community Development Department also experienced staff reduction. We were able to restore one position on the building side in the last year, and that has helped that part of the department out quite a bit. Between that addition, some reorganization efforts, and implementation of a suite of different technologies, we've gotten to a point where I feel pretty good about our staffing levels and our capacity to respond to the different demands on the building side of the department. Unfortunately, Gary is going to be retiring during this next fiscal year, and that's going to create some real challenges for us. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment.
No.
But I want to speak to the...
No.
What's that?
No.
You're not going to allow it? So we also had some reductions on the planning side during the recession. None of that capacity has been added back yet, despite the demand for it. Right now, much like I reported last year, it's really all the staff can do to keep up with current planning activities. So keep up on the applications that are coming in the door and keep them moving through, in addition to managing the community development block grant program and the floodplain management program. We are very fortunate that the staff that we do have is very capable and very dedicated. They've put in whatever hours they need to in order to make sure that projects are getting done on time. Kind of along that same vein, last year we reported that we hadn't been able to do much more than survive, and we didn't feel like we'd been able to respond adequately to council requests, planning commission requests, or things within the division that we thought we should be accomplishing just to better serve the development community. We have been able to take some steps over this last year to transition away from that problem, but it does take some time. It doesn't go as fast as any one of us would like, and it will continue to require some additional capacity as we move forward, whether that be in the form of eventually adding additional staff or seeking consultant support on specific work efforts. One of the benefits, sorry, I'm recovering from a cold, so I'm trying not to have a coughing fit here. One of the benefits of having some oversight over the Community Development Department and portions of the Public Works Department is that I have more opportunities to evaluate how we deliver services and look for efficiencies. Last year, when we were talking about staffing levels, I'd said that when we got to this point, where we are now, presenting on next fiscal year's budget, that I thought that we would be in the place where we would have to request an additional position. Instead, what we've done is to take advantage of an existing vacant position on the engineering side of the Public Works Department and shuffle staff between Community Development and Public Works in order to better utilize their skill sets. That move allowed us to hire a new planner into the planning department. So we now have a person in a planning staff position that has a stronger planning background and should help us respond to demands on that work group. In the budget that you'll see tonight, we're also proposing to increase a part-time planning employee's time by less than 1/10 of an FTE in order to keep Bob from having to continue covering the counter every week. When Bob was new, that counter coverage was beneficial because it helped him build relationships with people in the community, learn our code, all those types of things. But those benefits have really ran their course, really need to transition more towards Bob focusing on managing his staff and managing some of the larger projects that we have coming down the pike. Excuse me. So these changes all represent a small increase in budget, but they're really only a fraction of what would have been if we would have asked to add an additional position this year. We will, again, need to add more capacity at some point, but I really want to see how these recent changes play out before we take the leap and make that request for additional position. So the last item before we jump in here, slideshow and details, is I just want to take a moment to recognize Gary, which he'll probably hate me for doing. But since he's became the building official, Gary's more frequent than he would like. At times, he's been doing the work of what 2 to 3 people used to do in that work group. On countless occasions, he's put the future of the department ahead of himself, and he really deserves a lot of credit for pulling the building division out of the hole during the recession. He has an impeccable work ethic. His standards of customer service are extremely high, and I sincerely doubt that we could find anybody that knows the code as well as Gary does. So thank you, Gary, for everything that you've done to keep the building division going, building relationships with the community, and just overall providing excellent service for the city. Thank you. All right, you're up now.
No, we could go on.
We could go on?
Yeah.
Okay. So, as I mentioned, 2 divisions in the Community Development Department, Building and Planning. Briefly describe each one here. Planning Planning is responsible for land use, which includes things like development review, long-range planning, historic preservation, floodplain management, and CDBG program management. Wow, I did nothing and that just moved. Okay. From a workload standpoint, among other things, excuse me. This really messed me up. Okay. The planners have received 114 land use applications this last fiscal year. Some of those are dealt with at a staff level, others are required to go to the Planning Commission, and others yet are required to go to council. Land use applications can be very complex, they can be very controversial, and they are often extremely time-consuming. Staff's also held 74 pre-application meetings with developers. These are free meetings offered to developers where they can come in, learn about what might be required on the developments that they're proposing. Meetings include planners, building, fire department, and public works staff. And a planner is available for consultation at the customer service counter every business day, 8 to 5, and the planners rotate through that coverage. Sometimes a single walk-up inquiry can take an hour or more to address, so it's not a small. It's not like they're getting a lot of time to focus on other things when they have the counter. So they do all that work with just over 6 FTE. Land use reviews have to be completed within 120 days, which for some applications includes a public hearing process. And they have 3 commissions that they work with in order to get their work done. On the building side, building is responsible for building plan review, inspections, ADA compliance, emergency response, and code compliance. And I blew right by you. You didn't even get to do your introduction. Are you feeling rejected?
No. I'm Jeff Babbitt, the Public Works Community Development Business Manager. So I do all the accounting.
You're his evil twin.
I was ready to go. Jeff puts all of our budgets together for us and keeps us honest.
Happy to stay quiet.
Happy to stay quiet, that's right. In building, last fiscal year, they issued over 2,500 permits, conducted over 10,000 inspections, and reviewed improvements valued at over $100 million, all of which are increases over the previous fiscal year. They did that with just over 7 FTE, complete their inspections within 24 hours of request. Residential plan reviews have to be completed within 10 business days. We're typically ahead of that. And they're self-supported by revenues generated from building permits.
Now, that plan review process, I mean, 10 business days is a pretty good turnaround. Is that facilitated by that new software suite that you brought in the last couple
It certainly
of years?
helps. The 10 business days, again, is just for like single-family residential construction, so a commercial or industrial project is on its own timeline. But certainly the not having to pass paper back and forth to address issues certainly cuts down on the time.
Thank you.
No problem. So in this year's budget, we do not propose any major changes from last year. As I mentioned, we're proposing the addition of less than 1/10 of an FTE to have one of our part-time employees help cover the counter. And that and the other changes I discussed are really what keeps us from having to add a new position this year or request a new position. that lack of capacity on the planning side, it's really a balancing act. It does impact the time it takes for us in order to respond to requests for things like code amendments or evaluations, but it also helps us keep overall costs down for the general fund. So a little bit of a plus and minus to that approach. And then I think it's important to note that there's also uncertainty about the future of the community development block grant funds. The federal budget may not include allocations to support this program this next year. Even if we continue to receive a level of funding that makes sense for us to continue to participate in that program, I think it's going to make some sense to consider moving that position that's funded with CDBG funds back over to the planning budget that it was originally housed in. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I'm not going to get into those details tonight because it's not proposed in the budget, but I just wanted to make council aware that that's a discussion that we may have in the near future as the funding situation changes. Looking at the big picture, the Community Development Department has a proposed budget of just under $5 million. Planning budget is a bit shy of $2 million, and the building side is shy of $3 million. Gary is estimating that he's going to be able to maintain but not grow the reserves in the building division this year, that we'll have this year, by the end of next fiscal year. So at this point, I was going to get into the actual budget details. We're almost done. Any questions on the big pictures before we get into the details?
I have a question. It's probably a silly one. What does CDBG stand for?
Community Development Block Grant.
Block
And we'll
grant.
talk,
Thank you.
it has its own budget with its own line item details, and so we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anything else?
All right. I'm going to go quick and at a high level, and I am happy to stop at any point to answer questions. I'm going to try to keep us moving. The planning budgets are on pages 158 and 159. There are not any drastic changes in the planning budget. I'll just call out a couple lines that might have drawn your attention. First, you'll see a reduction in the temp line, since we don't, that reduction is there because we don't anticipate needing significant temp work being done with the organizational changes that we've made. You'll also see a reduction in employer-paid benefits based on the new healthcare program that we've entered into with the union. For increases, most notable is the contracted services line. The increases there are necessary to fund various projects related to code amendments and supporting various planning activities. These projects will be prioritized and addressed based on council direction. They'll be identified through our code audit process. So council may recall, I don't know, maybe a month and a half ago, we were going to have our code audit discussion on the heels of one of our other joint meetings with the Planning Commission. That meeting went long, and council requested to defer that conversation until June. So we had hoped to have had a conversation by the time we got here tonight about the specific projects and which ones were council's priorities, but we weren't able to accommodate that. So the point here is that the projects that are being funded by the increase in that line item are going to be based on priorities that council sets, based on detailed discussions about the potential projects and any others that council is interested in at that next set of meetings. So it's not a wide open allocation to be spent on whatever staff comes up with. Are there any questions on the planning budget before I move to building?
Question, yes.
Yes, sir.
We've got one here. Oh, okay.
Visa fees up substantially, how come?
Credit card fees?
Yeah.
More people paying with credit cards?
Okay. That's the normal way we get paid these days?
Frequently.
Rich, I brought this up, I don't know, 3 years ago, because in a lot of the budgets for different departments, you'll see credit card fees. And at the time, I said, well, you know, why, like Jeff says, people like to pay with credit card for whatever reason. And, you know, can we charge a fee? No, you can't charge a fee.
Yes, you can.
Well, it's like a business. But Bessie said that the county had come up with a program, Wes, I don't remember if we looked into it or what, but I don't
far as I
think we
know,
ever
if this-
came up with a better solution other than
Stuart
than
may
what we're doing.
stomp on me for saying something wrong here, but as far as I know, we can charge convenience fees by department for whatever activity if we wanted to. I'm not aware, there's none in Public Works or in Community Development that are done that way. I don't know if there's any in the city that are.
No, they're not.
I guess I was under the impression that person says, I'm going to pay with a credit card, and you say, oh, it's 3% more. I wasn't aware that you could do that.
Well, Visa, MasterCard were sued and they lost. You can, as a merchant, I can charge people. I mean, the problem is not Joe Schwartz who walks in, it's the people who have cards that have a whole lot of benefits. Some of them go upward of 5%. And if you have something that has a low margin, 5% ruins you. So
here's the rub with it.
Yeah.
If you don't use credit cards, you have a lot more staff time in processing payments and all of those things.
Well-
So your costs, you might, what you push people away from using by charging the convenience fee, you might thereby be increasing other costs.
Yeah. No, and I understand that.
The convenience fee is in fact used a lot now in business because of the rewards cards primarily. But you don't hear, the only time I do it is when it's on a welding machine because it's a low margin. But a lot of times people get charged a convenience fee and they say nothing. Simply because it's just, pretty soon you get used to it. I mean, whether or not the city as, if you go back to, I guess we're with US Bank, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. More important than having a credit card fee is having the lowest rate. Because there are now people out there making wonderful deals. I mean, there is that portion that Visa, MasterCard, those people take. But then, if you're not a big bank, if you're not one of the top 10, you really don't do that. It's done by one of the giant banks. And so others are simply resellers, and the big banks can give you a real good deal if they are so inclined. I mean, it's points instead of percentages, most cases.
I can't resist, I'm just playing devil's advocate with you. People get used to paying the fees, is that kind of like TLT? They get used to paying the TLT, whatever it is?
Well, it is much in the same situation, because it's something that happens after the fact. I mean, it's, you get the bill, well, with TLT, you get your hotel bill, and there it is at the bottom, and you recognize, well, there's nothing I can do about it.
Could I add just a little bit, not to detract from Jeff and his presentation, but just some additional information. About 3 years ago, the City Council approved a contract with a company called Visant, and Visant does an ongoing review of our fees, as Rich was suggesting, the fees that we actually pay for the processing of those payments. And they send us a quarterly statement identifying, well, actually a monthly statement reconciling, and then quarterly is the one I pay more attention to. And over the last 3 years, they've identified savings of $38,000 on reduced fees that they identified, in addition to reductions in fees that we had identified prior to that contract. And if the council recalls, at the time they were considering that contract, we felt we had identified all the areas of savings that we were aware of. And the council at that time, in approving the contract, asked us to look one more time. And we found an additional place that we could negotiate a fee. And in addition to that, Visant has still found us additional savings. And so we do have a third party who knows credit cards that's looking at our processing and the processing charge to take those payments. So that contract is still in place. I think we're about year 3 of a 5-year contract. Well, let's see, yeah. I think it might be a 3-year contract.
And, you know, from a business perspective, I get 6 or 7 phone calls a week of people trying to say, hey, you know, let me help you. Some of them are good, and most of them are simply annoying. But, I mean, when it comes up, doing the due diligence would be a good deal, and, you know, but that's kind of a council thought, not a budget committee thought.
You've got another question here?
Can you give us an example of some of the contractual services that you're using, you know, what they, obviously, they're probably someone that you have to use because your own staff can't provide that service, or?
That would be a perfect example. The work efforts that would be specifically funded, like in the difference of the increases, specifically targeted at projects that will require consultant support, either because of experience that's needed to bring to the table, technical expertise, or it could also be used if we had a capacity issue.
Be like an engineering firm then, or something like that?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, moving on to building. Pages 160 through 164. Building budgets include building inspection and the electrical permit programs. The state mandates that electrical be kept separate from the rest of the building program. Let's see, this is one. So we had 2 new program narratives for you for these 2 budgets that we circulated. They should already be in front of you. Changes just reflect some updated statistics. They don't have any impact on the actual budget. Then the building inspection budget, there are a few line items that I'll call out. First, we have budgeted for up to 3 months of overlap between Gary and a new building official. I don't know that we'll end up utilizing 3 months, but we wanted to budget conservatively and have identified to be able to use up to that amount if we deemed necessary. It's also a new code year, so new books need to be purchased, and staff training is a little higher than normal. So you see that reflected in a number of different lines. And then software license and fees is going up a little due to shuffling costs from the software line, which is going down, and then paying for some technology that better serves our customers by allowing them to more easily make inspection requests on their smartphone. We received a lot of positive feedback on all the technology that we've implemented. And this addition was requested by the building community. Just as a matter of interest, if anybody is interested, we're estimating that about 50% of plan submittals and inspection requests are done utilizing our new technology, and we're continuing to work with people to try to grow that number.
Is that a function of most business, or is that individuals, or a combination thereof?
It's going to be a combination thereof.
Thank you.
Last item I wanted to mention, apologize, is the $60,000 transfer out to police code enforcement. It's at the very bottom of the page, if I remember correctly. This is the second year of a 5-year plan to pay back the general fund, $300,000 it gave to the building division in order to keep the doors open during the recession. This $60,000 is coupled with money from CARA to fund the new code enforcement officer position in police. In my personal opinion, that position is something that's been needed for a while, and I think it's been a huge success so far, with much thanks to the chief's drive to get the program started and established, and Chris, who's just really been doing good work in that position ever since he hit the ground running.
One small item, 61034 professional publications. Jumping-
Yes.
What is that? $8,800 for 1,000?
New books and all of that stuff. So the increase is related to new code year, so new books and things like that.
National codes kicking in. Okay.
Yeah. So we'll continue to fund that $60,000 transfer out to the police department for the next 3 years following this one, assuming that we continue to be able to afford it. And then after that, an alternative funding source is going to need to be identified, but it's secure for the foreseeable future. We've got a couple grant budgets to go through, so if there's any questions on the details of the building inspection and electrical budgets, I'll take them.
We're renting space.
Stuart charges.
We're stabbing ourselves, okay.
Stewart's fault.
It's all Stuart's fault, that's right. All right, so grants, they go from 165 to 168. 2 grant programs in community development, the Community Development Block Grant Program and the State Historic Preservation Grant. CDBG budgets are on pages 166 and 177. Now, it's been a while, but now that the city's population is greater than 50,000, we're considered what's called an entitlement community, which allows us to receive CDBG funding allocations through the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. Funds can be used for administration and projects or programs that benefit Albany's low and moderate income residents, homeless, seniors, and other special need residents. We have separate funds created for each of these activities because of limitations on how money can be spent on administration. The challenge is that we have to spend at least 50% of the funds each year in order to receive future allocations, so we have to carefully track our expenditures and make sure that we're allocating funds to programs and places that will actually put the money to work. This year's proposed expenditures are consistent with the 5-year consolidated plan and the 1-year action plans that went through the Community Development Commission, City Council, and HUD. Council actually had an action plan come before them at the last meeting, if I remember correctly. What we've done in this budget is assume that the funding from HUD is going to be the same this fiscal year as last fiscal year. But as I mentioned, the funds are at risk of being substantially reduced in favor of other priorities in the federal budget. Another thing to note is that it's important to remember in the CDBG budgets that there's carryover funds that can be carried over from, obviously, like I said, we have to spend 50%. That other 50% can be accessed in the next fiscal year. So, and when you look at these budgets, it might look like we're receiving more or less in any one given year, but that's not really the case. It's more a function of the balancing of multiple years of allocations coming in at different times. The last grants for historic preservation, it's on page 168. This money comes through the State Historic Preservation Office, or SHPO. It's typically used for residential rehabilitation grants on registered historic homes, several activities for public outreach in support of the, used for a lot of public outreach activities and also support of the Landmarks Advisory Commission. The state requires a 50% match for these monies, and we routinely meet that with staff time. And then this is one where if we don't spend the money, it just goes back to the state. So we do our best to spend the money every year. Looks like there's some things changing in this budget this year, but really what we're doing is going back to our standard approach. Last year, we funded a project as part of the Sustainable City Year program with the U of O. Yeah, it's a one-time effort, and so what we're doing this year is going back to basically business as usual, which is funding primarily rehabilitation grants, providing some design assistance, and then promoting Historic Preservation Month. That's all I have on the community development budget, so happy to answer any additional questions before we get started with Public Works.
A connection note, Ed mentioned that Sunrise Park funding to make that happen. Some of that money came from the CDBG funding. That's how that program works and works well to make those things happen.
Yep. Sounds like it's your show, Chris.
She got all dressed up for this. I think she thinks she must want something.
It's so hard to go to the unemployment office and doesn't know about.
They're closed.
They do that by phone. They do it by phone anymore, so you could do it in the audience if you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, take me a minute to keep it going. I'm proposing that we add a metric to next year's budget that is minutes per page by department. Because I think we could win. We'll see. Right. Well, either way. Okay. Everyone have their handout?
Still got one going around. That's, I didn't see that one. So. One more for you. It's second.
Another three. There's this one. And more.
Oh, and more.
Timber.
Okay, Madam Chair, thank you for having us tonight. My name is Chris Bailey. Jeff Lynn and I will be presenting the Public Works budget request. Public Works has both an engineering department and an operations department, which are administrated separately, but work together in terms of funding and assignment of activities. I'm the Public Works Operations Director, and I'm responsible for operation and maintenance of the city's water, wastewater, stormwater, streets, transit, and airport programs, along with several internal service funds such as facilities maintenance.
I already introduced myself, but in engineering, we're responsible for designing construction of capital projects, development review, assistance on regulatory issues, long-range planning, utility billing, and then administrative services for both public works and community development.
And I'm just responsible for preparing the budget, VIP, and all the other county-related activities related to public works.
His other responsibility is to stop us when we go off course, so hopefully he doesn't have to say anything. On the dais tonight, you should have a copy of the PowerPoint slides in case it's difficult to see the screens. I'm going to be going through the slides fairly quickly. Most of you have seen a lot of this information before, and we have a lot of budget pages to cover. So please stop me if you have questions, but I'm going to try to get through the slides quickly and actually get into the budget pages. As in previous years, we need to say thank you to a lot of the people who are sitting in the back of the room, who are the supervisors and managers in Public Works that really do a lot of the work getting this budget put together. They do a great job, and they're key to our success. Next year's proposed budget does not include any major organizational changes or any large financial changes. We have a proposed budget of $96.7 million. There are over 100 pages of budget sheets we'll be going through, and they include operating programs, debt service, and capital projects. I'm going to give you a quick overview through the PowerPoint of the department and the changes that are included in the budget, and then we'll jump into the pages. Any questions before I start? Public Works has a wide range of responsibilities for the city's infrastructure. These are broken down into 4 major categories: transportation, wastewater, drinking water, and stormwater. Through our activities, we support all 4 of the strategic plan themes of great neighborhoods, a safe city, healthy economy, and effective government. The total number of proposed positions in Public Works for next fiscal year is 122.43. This number did not change from the current fiscal year, but some position changes are proposed to occur that we'll discuss in detail as we get to those programs. The personnel in Public Works are divided into 2 departments, engineering and operations. Engineering has 28 FTE in engineering services and utility billing services, and 9 FTE in administrative services. The administrative section provides support to Public Works engineering and operations, as well as community development. As mentioned at the beginning, these are the programs that Jeff oversees. I'm responsible for operations, which has 85.43 FTE across all 4 utilities, as well as several internal service programs. As I mentioned, our total department budget is $96.7 million. And our department works across several funds, which is one reason for the length and complexity of our section of the budget. The budget for next fiscal year is a 7.9% increase over the current fiscal year budget. However, that does not mean that expenditures are actually going up 7.9%, or that rate revenue or those sorts of things are increasing by that much. The increase is primarily the result of reserve accounts that are being carried over and growing from year to year, as well as estimates of incoming revenue, for instance, from funding for street projects and those sorts of things. So we're not actually planning to spend $96.7 million. We have to include the revenue or the reserve funds and those things in the total bottom line of what we're responsible for. If that makes sense. The budget that we prepared is conservative. It's based on no assumed utility rate increases for fiscal year 17-18. However, those decisions are ultimately made by the City Council when we present information on those utility programs. The emphasis for the coming fiscal year is to continue to define our efficiencies and improve the work that we do without having to raise rates and accomplishing what we need to do to manage our infrastructure. So the transportation section consists of the street system and its associated infrastructure. Albany has almost 200 miles of improved streets, and with all of the assets that go along with those, which include 21 traffic signals, over 7,000 signs, and 61 miles of striping, all of which has to be maintained, improved, replaced, and rebuilt over time. The engineering department helps with design and construction services and long-term facility planning for the transportation system.
I have a comment. I want to thank you for using a picture of my business there.
Oh.
It's just
Under the trestle.
You
That,
recognize
I
that
included
place.
that picture because it's one of the things that street maintenance, they get asked to do weird things. And so street maintenance led the charge in trying to improve the lighting on the trestle.
Yeah.
And they also picked up all that garbage that's in that bottom picture. So they do a lot of things you wouldn't think are related to maintaining street condition.
Don't most of the trucks that hit that trestle hit it in broad daylight?
Oh, yeah.
I'm not going to say what I was going to say, so we've tried to help them. So we'll see. Transportation also includes the Albany Municipal Airport as well as the public transit system. We have 3 public transit programs: Albany Transit, the Lynn-Benton Loop, and Albany Colorado. Funding for transportation comes from a variety of sources depending on the program. We've listed several of them here, and these are local, state, and federal programs, as well as revenue that's generated by some of the programs themselves. So for instance, the airport has lease revenue, transit has fare revenue, et cetera. In wastewater, we provide wastewater conveyance through over 200 miles of sewer main and 11 lift stations. Treatment takes place at the water reclamation facility in Talking Water Gardens. Within the sewer fund, we also provide services for response to environmental concerns such as leaking underground storage tanks, federally required permitting for significant industrial users within the city, and a large portion of the maintenance of our stormwater system. Engineering provides design and construction services for sewer system repairs, long-range utility planning, and assists with regulatory compliance. Funding for wastewater programs is primarily through rate revenue and SDCs, as well as payments received from the City of Millersburg and ATI Watching for treatment of their wastewater. The drinking water program includes the San Am Albany Canal, the distribution system including 7 reservoirs, and water treatment at 2 treatment facilities.
You stated that you don't see costs going up this year significantly. Are the costs going to go up for the canal with Lebanon abandoning its part of the canal and the maintenance they would normally do for, they're building their own water plant, so how's that going to affect things? Or
Yeah, so we have an IGA with Lebanon that they're actually going to be paying us some funding in the next fiscal year. Their water plant is not going to be online yet. So
Okay.
until their water plant is online, they pay us a canal fee. and we do all of the maintenance, but they will be contributing until their plant goes online. And we worked out another agreement that helps with some other concerns on the canal, so Lebanon's continuing to pay at least through next fiscal year.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see, where was I? So Lebanon pays based on the terms of the ITAs that we've negotiated with them, and Millersburg pays for their fair share of operating costs. It should have been on that slide. So there's the amount from Lebanon we're expecting this year.
Okay.
The stormwater system consists of about 130 miles of pipe, 70 miles of ditches. We have thousands of manholes, catch basins, and inlets, and over 100 stormwater quality facilities. In addition to maintenance, Public Works provides response to spills that may enter the storm system. We do sampling of stormwater for contaminants and engineering and design for stormwater infrastructure. Fiscal year 17-18 will be the first full fiscal year with a dedicated funding source for stormwater. The new stormwater fee went into effect March 1st, 2017, and it was designed to approximately fund the historic levels of maintenance activity in the stormwater system. The dedicated funding is going to significantly help with transparency of stormwater revenues and expenditures, and we'll see that when we get to the stormwater fund. Public Works also has a handful of internal service programs which charge back to utilities. These include utility billing, water quality control, instrumentation and control, facilities maintenance, engineering services, and administration. These programs all charge back for the time spent on various projects to the utilities that they're working on.
And people do appreciate the meter reader letting them know when a leak is happening on their property.
That is nice. So overall, for next year's budget, we have no real significant changes financially from our current budget. This budget, as I said, was built assuming no utility rate increases for water, sewer, stormwater, and there's no change to the total number of FTE in Public Works. However, we are shuffling a few people around and making some changes, which I'll discuss now. As with many other city departments and employers everywhere, we are continuing to have key people retire who've been here for a long time and hold a great deal of institutional knowledge. So one area we're addressing next year, which is resulting in some personnel changes, is shifting who is managing our major regulatory compliance activities. We have a person on staff who's going to step up and take on that role. So first, we're proposing to reclassify the wastewater superintendent upward to assume some of those responsibilities. And then in order to create space in her daily work life, we are also proposing to eliminate the environmental program supervisor and create a new position, which is an environmental services manager. So we're trading a supervisor for a manager who will have more capability to manage some of the work that the superintendent is currently doing. We're also, to help with that, we're reclassifying an environmental services technician 2 to a lead role, and that specifically will help with the industrial pretreatment program. Aside from that, I'm also proposing to add 1 FTE in the water fund. This is a treatment facilities operator, which will be split 50% with Vine Street and 50% with the AM treatment plant. That group is having difficulties accomplishing scheduled tasks and ensuring shift coverage, which we have noticed has caused quite a bit of overtime expenditures, and they have relied on a full-time temporary employee for about the last 2 years, which is going to create a problem under our bargaining unit, collective bargaining agreement, if we don't address that. So proposing to address that in the next fiscal year by adding a position. The result of all of these changes that I've described so far would be an increase in personnel expenditures of about $23,000, except that we're offsetting that because we have a vacant position in Public Works Administration that we have determined we don't need to fill. So we're eliminating the position of Administrative Project Coordinator, and other people have assumed those duties. That gives us an overall personnel savings of about $55,000. So we're shuffling around some tasks and taking on the responsibilities we need, but we're not actually adding FTE or expense.
Chris, can you go back to the previous slide on the proposed budget? It says number 2, budgets are based on no projected rate increases.
Right.
Usually we have a 5-year look forward for the water.
So-
Right now, you're not anticipating any,
Right. We are not projecting the need to request for water, sewer, stormwater rate increases right now. Yeah. Water, sewer, right. But we, as you mentioned, we look at those with council every year. So conservatively, we haven't budgeted any additional revenue for those. The council, it may be when we get to that review that we may then need to request
it's
additional.
based on what the results are coming, yeah. Okay.
But we aren't including any revenue in our budget because, we're trying to budget conservatively, and we'll see what we need when we get there.
We still plan to have those discussions. For instance, on sewer, we'll be back in front of council before July to give a 5-year look and have those discussions. But I'm going to tell you with sewer, we're not going to be proposing a
But we're going to be having the same type of a process for stormwater then also, aren't we?
We will.
Later in the fiscal year.
Truthfully, we just didn't see how we could roll out a stormwater program, roll back sewer and water rates, and then 4 months later, raise rates. I just don't know how that just wasn't something we felt like bringing forward.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just asking.
So that is the end of the slideshow. Are there any questions at this point?
One for transit.
Okay, do you want to
Can we
wait
get
till we
there?
get there? We'll get there pretty quick.
I think it's page 2.
Yeah, we'll be there soon. Okay, so what we're going to do is start going through the actual program budgets, and we start on page 170 to 173. So the first, well, I should say, the way we do that, we try to do this every year is to sort of group our discussions on pages and not go through every page because there's a lot of pages. So the first group is the 2 airport programs. So we have the airport operating budget on pages 170, 171. This program pays for .1 FTE, which is 10% of the transportation superintendent's time. In reality, he spends a lot more time than that on the airport. And so that's probably the main challenge with this program is it needs more staffing. It doesn't have enough revenue to support a full-time position. So that's one of the things we keep working on from year to year, trying to figure out how to more fully staff the airport operating budget. The airport capital budget is pages 172, 173. This program receives funds from the transient lodging tax revenues and is intended to use as match for federally funded capital programs or to pay for capital projects that aren't able to be federally funded. So currently we have leveraging $256,500 in additional federal funding and $24,300 in state grant funding with only $2,700 expended out of this budget. So it's a pretty good return.
Yeah.
Any questions on the airport?
Yeah, just a quick one. Before you said you had about a $55,000 savings in the other budgets you were talking about, and you're looking for revenue streams by the changes in the headcounts that you were going to do.
What was the question?
He's wanting to know if we can get 55,000 in savings.
And you're looking for additional revenue for the airport. Why aren't you
Oh.
applying one to the other?
No. So the airport is a self-sufficient fund. There's no funds from outside airport revenues that are dedicated to airport funding. So Well, I guess we could. The council could say, here's some money, general fund money or something we could put at the airport, but it's intended to support itself. So the $55,000 that's being saved throughout the department is scattered among all of the enterprise funds, water and sewer, stormwater. And it's not really eligible to be moved over to the airport.
Question? There have been folks who said they wanted to build more hangars. Are there any hangars in the works?
We haven't got any planning submissions for hangars. We have land for them. They're welcome to come on down. There's nothing stopping them from proposing and coming in with their plans for new hangars.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to transit. Starts on page 174. So Albany Transit, as I said, has 3 programs: Albany Transit System, Linbit, Loop, and Colorado. These programs are supported primarily by federal public transit grants, with local funds providing the match for the grants. The Linbit and Loop is unique in that it's a partnership between the Albany area MPO, the Corvallis area MPO, OSU, and LBCC. The city of Albany itself is not actually contributing any funding to the loop. Let's see. One of the goals we've had in the strategic plan for years is to find a new facility for the buses, which are currently in a pole barn behind Fire Station 12. So one of the changes, one of the things I wanted to call out this year is on page 176, line number 66009, is a building replacement. This is a transfer we've been able to save, scrimp and save, basically, over the years, and we are going to try to transfer $350,000 to our facilities replacement fund, which is a reserve fund where we hold money until we can build or repair public works facilities. And that is intended to try to buy property for the bus barn. If we can acquire property using local money, then we can probably get a federal grant to actually construct the building, which would be quite more cost-effective than trying to do it all ourselves. Both the ATS and the Linbit budgets have revenue for the purchase of replacement buses. So in the ATS program on page 175, that revenue is rolled into line 42045. The new bus costs about $400,000. So that's, most of the revenue is there, and then we have transferring in from our capital equipment fund to provide the local match for that bus, which is 49041. And the bus itself is being purchased out of line 70005, where you can see $440,000 expenditure for the bus. There's similar numbers in the Linbit and Loop budget. Let's see, what else do I have to say? Paratransit ridership has grown by about 300 rides per month. And notable in paratransit, the paratransit program provides senior and disabled transportation. It's required, as if you have a public transit system, you're required to have a complimentary paratransit system for the disabled. And our paratransit program is growing, and we have more demand for rides, and the rides themselves are becoming longer and more complicated as more of the population is becoming older and less able to get around on their own. So the problem it creates for us is that we can't use volunteers as much, which we continue to use. Now more of the rides are requiring actual trained staff. So it's shifting how we provide that service a little bit. Yeah.
Are we ready?
Go ahead.
Couple, well, paratransit first. How many of the rides go to the new facilities that are being built in Albany?
Like Bonaventure?
Like Bonaventure?
We have approximately 15 clients that we pick up, some daily and some once a month. But right now, there's about 15 clients that are signed up for the service that live at Bonaventure. And then we actually take people to Bonaventure to either look at the facility or to play cards there. There's some card groups that meet there and play there.
Do we get to charge for this?
We charge a fare, so it's $2.
Correct.
$2 per one way, so a round trip would be $4. We're limited by federal law. You can only charge a paratransit ride twice what you charge a regular transit ride.
Which brings me to my second question. We're still charging $1
Oh, for transit.
for transit. Portland charges $2.50. Salem is $1.60. Eugene is $1.75 for standard. You know, I mean, it costs us, what, like $5
It costs us
in reality?
about $7 a ride.
$7 a ride. We're getting $1 of that back. Other people are charging much more than we're charging. Is there a reason we're not looking at a fare increase?
We can look at a fare increase. Right now, that's definitely something we can look into. We did a fare increase maybe, I don't remember how many years ago that was, Barry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, everything else has gone up in cost. I mean, our cost to do this has gone up dramatically.
Right.
Well, I wouldn't think we ought to charge $5.
Right.
I think at minimum, we ought to be charging at least $2.
Yeah, we can do a fare study. We're also currently doing a transit planning study. And so I think within the next several months, we'll be coming back to talk with the council, quite a bit about transit and what they would like us.
Well, and then the second thing is, how full are our buses at, and I'm not talking about loop, because that gets cram-packed, but our regular transit buses, how full are they? I just, when I see one, I look and see how many people are there, and it always seems to be 5 people or 3 people or something like that on the bus, and it's a pretty good-sized bus.
Sure.
Are we continuing to look at size of vehicle? I mean, fuel economy is how much weight you're running down the road.
Well, the buses are empty, so.
Realistically, you could do that in a 10-passenger van.
Right, the problem is, well, so to answer your question, how full are the buses? It just depends on the time of day and the route. The first morning route on Albany Transit is actually quite full. So our buses, they provide probably 2 primary types of rides. They provide rides for people who are generally trying to get places like to school or to work, so somewhat of a commuter type service. And they also provide the only source of transportation for a significant part of the community that has no other option. So we have some riders who are sort of choice riders in that they're riding to get to school or to work. But a lot of our riders, in our last study, the majority of our riders were what you call, they have no choice. They're transit-dependent riders. So during those busy times of day, early in the morning, late in the afternoon, the buses are fairly full. I would say some of them are packed on the first run in the morning. ATS, afternoon, it sort of spreads out as people come home at different times. As far as providing different sized buses during the day, conceptually, that sounds really good, but then you have to purchase all of those different sized buses. And we just don't really have. Well, it's just a matter of finding the resources. If we had a lot of optional sized buses, we could mix that in. One of the things I will say is that in this transit planning study, we are trying to identify more efficient ways to serve sort of outlying parts of the system. A lot of people are riding in the meat of the city, the shopping areas, the medical areas, and what our plan has looked at is how do we get people in and out efficiently from the edges. So we'll be talking about that when we come back with council.
I guess the question is, are we doing this because people need to get someplace, or are we looking to find more people because we have buses that run around?
Yes.
Either
both.
is a legitimate
Yes.
concern,
Mhm.
but, I mean, when we're receiving $1 and it costs us $7,
Right.
it's crazy.
The thing with fares is there's this concept called fare elasticity, and we went through this last time we raised fares with council, and so we'll come back and discuss that with you again, and you can tell us what you would like us to do with fares. So we'll have to do some study on fares, and then we can come back and talk about that.
Anytime you raise somebody's fare, they say, oh my God, I can't afford it, but,
Yeah.
they always seem to have the money.
Well, it's very common when you raise fares, you lose riders. You always, it doesn't matter, and then it bounces back. So that's sort of what we're trying to study, is how fast will it bounce back? What will that do to our ridership? Those sort of things.
Okay, well,
That's a whole meeting. We'll
well, that's at least a whole meeting.
Right. Okay. Any other questions on transit? All righty. Next, we're going to move to the street fund.
Well, you don't talk about paratransit.
What's that?
How about paratransit?
I've included that in transit. What, do you have
Oh,
a
okay.
question?
Well, on page 181, the section 5307 jumped up 75% from 208 to 364. That's just part of the,
So, let me see why that is happening.
We don't have an obligation.
Yes, so there's a lot of capital money in that line, where if you look down on 70005, capital equipment expenditure, we're going to be purchasing 2 replacement wheelchair accessible vans.
okay.
And so there's capital funding in that 75% increase.
Thank you.
Okay, street fund, starts on page 183. Okay, I want to point out on the program narrative, which is page 1, oh, no, wait, I'm on street revenues. Sorry, let's go back a page. Okay, so street maintenance revenue on page 183. This is where the state gas tax revenue is received. You see it at the top there. It's fairly flat, proposed, we're anticipating for next year. There is some discussion about state gas tax, and we haven't assumed there will be an increase, or we just went with what we have been receiving, so that's why that number is roughly what we've been receiving in previous years.
And your transfers in there from sewer water, just not quite sure. I mean, that bounces from nothing to, $68,000.
Sure. So what is happening in next, so the in lieu of franchise fee revenue is used to help fund street maintenance work when we anticipate that we need additional funding. Next year, we're anticipating we'll be able to fund it without that revenue, so that's going to capital next
Okay.
year. Street maintenance program is on page 184. And I wanted to point out the FTE at the bottom. This is one of the pages that you got passed around right before I started talking. A replacement page for street maintenance program narrative. So the FTE numbers, there are 7 FTE assigned to street maintenance, but because stormwater is paying for some of the work that street maintenance does, that is actually stormwater work, we have taken that funding and calculated how much of an FTE that works out to each year. So you'll see that in this budget and in wastewater collections, and then when we get to the stormwater operations budget, you'll see FTE that equal to the amount of personnel expenditures that stormwater is paying for. I hope that's clear. So there are actually 7 people working in street maintenance, but each year Some of one person works on stormwater activities, primarily street sweeping. And a portion of street sweeping is a stormwater function, and so we allocate part of that FTE to the stormwater fund. I hope that makes
Does that
sense.
include leaf pickup?
Leaf pickup is performed by Republic Services,
Okay.
so we don't actually do that.
That's a contractual service then.
It's paid for through your garbage bill, I think. We don't pay for leaf pickup.
Okay. Thank you.
I don't. Do we? We don't.
I don't
Okay.
have a question for everything.
Okay. Yeah. We have an answer. It might not be right.
I bet I could come up with something you don't have an answer for.
So the street maintenance program is a pretty steady program. You can see there's not a significant change in the bottom line of expenditures from year to year. The main thing I want to point out here is have you look at, well, it affects lines 60101 and 65528 and 66532. So what is happening is we're asking street maintenance to take over the asphalt and concrete repair work for water service repairs. Currently, we contract that out. We put out a request for bids, and we have a contractor. We've only ever been able to get one contractor to bid, and they charge a lot. So it's gotten to be unsustainable to contract that out. We can do it significantly less expensively in-house. So the way we're going to try that next year is 60101 is contractual services. That will pay for a temporary employee to add to our crew, and then the other two lines pay for the materials. And we can probably save the water program, they'll charge back to water, and we'll probably save the water program probably at least $50,000 next year. So that's our goal with that. It wouldn't be a street maintenance presentation if I didn't point out that streets pays for 100% of street lights, which is line 63008. Those costs continue to go up. We're almost at $500,000 a year in that expenditure.
Chris, does any of that plan for the future as far as switching over to like LEDs or anything like that?
We, Jorge and I are looking at a proposal to switch to LED, to take ownership of the light poles and convert them to LED. And there's an initial expense to purchase the light poles from Pacific Power and Consumers Power. And then we're going to be doing some analysis later in the summer probably to see how that works. We're trying to find a way to reduce this expense.
But the line item is a per pole.
Currently, we pay
Price.
essentially a per pole per wattage, whatever that charge is.
This is not a complaint, but what kind of expense does the city incur for the wonderful snowflakes that we get every year?
Oh.
Those are,
Street maintenance staff puts those up, and we have them, the Downtown Association, I think, contributes in repairing the burnt-out bulbs and things. It's not really much of a cost at all. There's the power that goes to them, which is not a blip on our total power bill.
okay.
It's not much.
Yeah,
But they're
Downtown
nice.
Association owns them and then
Right.
replaces them too.
Right, they do all when they break or fall apart, they get them repaired.
School does have that.
Okay, street admin is on page 186. This funds overarching street fund administration, and pretty steady from year to year. This also has the contingency for street maintenance in the bottom of the page there. You'll notice the transfer out to stormwater has gone to zero because now we have a stormwater funding source, so that's,
And the contingencies are,
what's that?
the contingencies are,
Oh, it's for, let's say, the cost for fuel, or let's say a street sweeper caught on fire, and we had, just thinking out of the box, and we had to replace it.
it jumped 150%, so I'm just wondering.
Right, it was really low this current fiscal year, and Jeff, do you know what that represents as far as a percentage? We try to keep about 10% in a contingency of operating, of total operating. And it's just, it's just for emergencies.
And what was it that caused facilities engineering 66026 to skyrocket like that?
So facilities engineering is one of our internal services, and they charge back based on where they're working. And so next fiscal year, we have an asset management project where we're going to improve our asset management of our street assets. So when our asset management group works on that, they charge back. And so we have a project plan next year for that.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Sounds good.
Okay. Mike says
Goal.
Okay. Jeff? Yeah, I'm gonna drink some water.
So we have, so we're on to the capital budgets. They're on pages 188 and 197. It's street capital, North Albany, frontage fee projects, PSPCIs and ours, and then the ADA capital budget. Really should not be any surprises in these budgets. I'm not going to go through them in any detail because we just went through anything of significance in the CIP meeting recently. So I'm not going to rehash all that again. The one thing to point out, though, is that council did recently provide direction to proceed with crossing improvements at 24th and Geary. So that project will be added to the CIP that goes out for public comment and will be added to the final draft of the budget. That's a $135,000 project. In the ADA capital budget, shown on page 197, we're building reserves to complete some larger projects in future years, as talked about in the CIP. We are making ADA improvements with our street and transit projects shown in other budgets, and then there's a significant ADA project being funded with CDBG funds, and that's along the Dave Clark path. So there's ADA improvements being made and completed around town. There's just not being funded with this budget next fiscal year. That's.
So basically, the elephant in the room is we really didn't do anything about the CIP discussion that we had about street infrastructure.
Well, I wouldn't say we didn't do anything. I mean, we have, let's see, is it Monday already? Monday, I think there's unless I'm getting my dates wrong, we have a presentation on the gas tax for discussion, and then based on the comments that we received at the last meeting, we're intending to come back to council after we get through the budget process and we get through the gas tax piece and see what of those other alternatives might want to be considered. And I think there's some other things for council to consider as far as timing of the different competing pieces. So
that's for future
really not
budgets.
for us to decide. All right, sewer starts on page 198. Total sewer budget is nearly $40 million. Our annual debt service payments for the water reclamation facility in Talking Water Gardens are a little over $5.5 million, which represents 34% of our anticipated rate in SDC revenue. So a significant portion of our revenue goes to cover our debt. As Chris pointed out, this budget's been built with the assumption of no sewer rate increase in July of this year, and as I said, we'll be coming back to council shortly to talk about what future years might look like. Another thing to highlight is you've heard us say on a number of occasions that there are some capacity needs out in the system, specifically the riverfront interceptor that needs to be addressed and is currently an unfunded need, but we will be coming back to council soon to talk about funding sources for that potential improvement. So the overall budget is pretty steady and we're getting a lot of important work accomplished, but there are still some very significant unfunded needs out there that we need to be looking at addressing in the coming years. We're back to operating budgets.
Okay. So the operating budgets, there are 6 program budgets on pages 199 through 210. start with wastewater treatment. A couple of things I want to point out on this program budget on page 200. We have an increase in 60254. This is our solids process line where essentially it pays mostly for the hauling of the solids to the landfill. The landfill costs have gone up, and our, so that's reflected, that's why that line has gone up. We are working diligently to try to solve that problem. We'll be talking with the council pretty soon about options for solids at the treatment plant.
This has to do with the cannibal?
Yes, that's the result of the failure of the cannibal.
And this stuff cannot be put into the process down on the lower, it has to go actually into the landfill itself.
Yes.
Cannot be, yeah.
Yes, it does not meet the regulatory requirements for land application. So
Well-
it has to go into the landfill.
Yeah.
The other line to point out, and it's a mixed message, on 63006, which is our electric bill. We've actually done a really good job reducing our per gallon electric costs, and the council got a presentation on that program, which we're continuing. We've worked with a consultant through the Energy Trust to help us find efficiencies and reduce our electric use at the treatment plant. The reason the line is going up here, our per gallon use of electricity has gone down, but our flows are anticipated to increase enough that it sort of overcomes that savings. So on a per gallon basis, we're doing great, but we're getting significant flows. This has particularly been a very wet winter. We're anticipating some high flows continuing next year, so that's why that number has gone up.
Makes sense. So what you're saying is without the energy savings, it would have gone up 15%?
That's exactly right. It's lower than it would have been if we hadn't been doing this energy audit program. Collections is next, page 201. Again, on the program narrative on page 201, the FTE number there is sort of bouncing around. This is the same as street maintenance, where this is the portion of a wastewater collections person that is paid for out of the street water fund has been removed from this FTE and put into the stormwater operating budget. I'll point that out when we get there. There are actually 10.5 FTE assigned to this program, but they do quite a bit of stormwater work, so that's why that number changed. In the budget itself, this program is pretty steady. The other thing I want to point out on the program narrative is, as Jeff mentioned just a second ago, we have needs in the Riverfront Interceptor. On the Riverfront Interceptor, we have permitted sewer overflow points, and these are points where the system is designed to surcharge and send diluted but untreated wastewater into the river, which is not something we like to do. But because we have capacity issues in that line, it happens. The number in this budget, or this page that you want to look at, is under performance measures, volume of sanitary sewer overflow. The current fiscal year, we're at 3.77 million gallons of sanitary sewer overflows, which is a lot. Not all of them have gone out of those permitted points, but if we could improve the Riverfront Interceptor system, that number would come down quite a bit.
And insurance and bonds went up a significant amount. And I haven't seen that before in many of the other things, so I thought I'd ask about that.
Stuart's probably going to have to help me. I think last week, someone asked an insurance question.
That was me.
We reallocated the formula, and so I should have probably pointed it out in street maintenance. Street maintenance was one of the losers under the old way we did the formula. They had a couple of extremely small claims, and their charge for insurance went up hundreds of percentage points.
Okay.
So I would guess that in the reallocation of how we're distributing our insurance premium, wastewater was one of the losers for this year. And, but in general, the goal with the redoing the insurance allocation was to smooth that so that street maintenance and transit and water distribution the last couple of years had huge jumps. This budget has a huge jump, but hopefully it will smooth over time so that we're not seeing these unanticipated increases.
You did very well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let's see, the other thing, I don't think there's much else to talk about in this. In this program, it's pretty steady, and they do a good job, collections doing a great job in the sewer system. Next, we have wastewater admin, which starts on 203. This is an overarching program. It pays for services across the wastewater utility. On this program budget on 204, you'll notice the personnel charges are going up a little bit. This is one of those personnel changes I mentioned at the beginning. We bumped up our wastewater superintendent, so there's a little bit of an increase in pay there to acknowledge increasing responsibilities.
Line item 66029, the water quality control charges. What does that comprise, and why did it jump?
Sure. So one of the other personnel changes that I mentioned is that we're adding a manager in environmental services manager to work for Kristen, and that's where this person's charges will be paid for.
Okay.
So that person would, water quality charges back, and the bulk of that person's work will be charged to the study.
Thank you.
Let's see. That's it for that one. Water reuse and biosolids, next program budget. This is we're carrying this one over in hopes that we can use it. So this is where, when we solve the solids problem at the treatment plant, and we are once again producing biosolids, those charges will appear here. We want to keep those separate. So we're just carrying this program forward. It's tiny, doesn't really have anything other than overhead charges in it. The wetlands, 207, basically status quo from the current year. There's a little bit of an increase in personnel services because we found that the previous position needed to be reclassified upward. It was, we came to council, Kristen came a few weeks ago and gave a report on that. So that got authorized in the current fiscal year, fully budgeted for next fiscal year. Last operating budget is industrial pretreatment. Starts on page 209. This program is a federally required program as part of our wastewater discharge permit. It regulates industrial customers who operate within the city. You will see in the program narrative, this number of FTE is going down by 1, so this is where the supervisor's position is being eliminated. And that position will appear in the water quality budget, which we'll get to in a second. So personnel charges are going down quite a bit. Even though we're increasing a regular technician to a lead, we're reducing a supervisor, so on the whole, it's a reduction in this budget.
So there's 4 capital budgets. They start on page 211. Sewer capital, equipment replacement, MCI, SPCR. The projects that are shown there are consistent with our CIP discussion. Equipment replacement is the only one that isn't part of the CIP process. So if there's questions on that, Chris would be able to respond to questions on that. On page 217, you'll see a large transfer out from SDCI to the debt service budget, which is the next one that we look at on pages 220 and 221. And the story here is going to be the same story that I've told the last several years, in that the annual debt payments for the reclamation facility in Hockman Water Gardens, a little over $5.5 million. About $1.5 million of that is SDC's responsibility. We've been living on SDC reserves for a number of years in order to make these payments, because our annual SDC revenues don't come close to covering SDC's share of the debt payment. So as we've been warning for the last couple of years, this means there's not going to be adequate SDC funds in the future for sewer projects, and that in the next year's budget. So the one that we'll be sitting here talking about next year, we'll be saying that
rates are going to be covering rate revenues are going to be covering a portion of SDC's share of that debt service payment. That's either going to impact future, future utility rates, or it's going to reduce the amount of work that we can get done with the rate revenue that we have in any given year. At this point, there really isn't anything we can do, but be aware of it, and that staff is continuing to discuss this issue with council as we have our utility rate discussions. Are there any questions about that? The sewer economic development funds on pages 222 and 223. We have no new rate money being directed to this budget because we already have the desired level of reserve, which is $500,000. So there's not any new activity happening at this point. Any questions on the capital budget or the EVO fund? All right, so we'll move to water then. Water starts on page 224. Total water budget is a little over $26 million. They've also been prepared with the assumption of no rate increase this next fiscal year. Similar to wastewater, we're working to stay ahead of the curve on perpetual life replacement by actively conducting assessments and then replacing failing lines, ideally, and in most cases, before they actually fail. We're back to operating.
Okay. We'll start with water admin on page 225. This provides, again, funding across all water programs, and the main change, which I probably should have pointed out earlier, is, let's see, there are a couple of changes. 63015, stormwater service charges. So the stormwater fee went into effect. We are charging ourselves. So based on facilities, we pay that fee. So I should have pointed that out in several budgets. It appears all over the place, wherever we have a facility that will be charged a fee. But also in this budget, on line 66024, this is where the utility billing charges that go to water are paid out of. And because stormwater is now assuming 1/3 of utility billing costs with water and sewer, this line has dropped significantly. So that's why that number has gone down so much. Stormwater is now, instead of water sewer sharing it equally, now there are 3 partners who pay for utility billing.
Why would council reduce rates by 2%, water rates by 2%?
Right. That savings in that line.
Question?
Sure.
With the advent of the stormwater system, the fact that we're not having rate increases in sewer and water, at least in the short term, can any of that be attributed to the fact that we have a stormwater fee?
No.
No. The way we analyze for water and sewer rate increases is based on the needs of that utility. Now, we anticipated the reduction in sewer and water, and, you know, as Jeff said, we didn't want to come back and say we need a sewer rate increase, and we really don't need one.
Right.
We can accomplish the work we need to accomplish next fiscal year without a sewer rate increase. Probably the same thing with water. We'll find out. We usually come back in December and talk with council about water. We anticipate we'll be fine. We maintain, is it just 5 years or is it more? It's more. A long lookout on both of, all of our utilities, and we anticipate we'll be fine.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next we have canal. Starts on page 227. This budget's pretty steady for next year. Not a whole lot of changes. The main thing is we're doing some, in the capital line, that line is going up to replace some SCADA equipment that is at the head gates of the canal. So that equipment has aged out. We'll be replacing some of that.
See, facilities maintenance has gone up 42%, and equipment replacement's gone up 58%. 65078, facilities maintenance, up by 42%.
Yes, so that, Mike Bryan, can correct me if I'm wrong, that's associated with work that we have planned in this program for our mechanics to do. So they project out how much work they'll be doing across all of our programs, and we're anticipating they'll be doing more work in the canal next year than they did this year. So that line goes up and down as required preventive maintenance changes. And what was the other line?
66011.
Oh, okay, equipment replacement. So this is where the program pays to replace primarily rolling stock, with large equipment. In the current year, I think maybe this year or last year, we purchased a new dump truck. That's not the right word. I think it's one of those trucks where the bed slides off. You can put on a dump bed or different types of beds. And we need to budget more to replace that according to the schedule. So that increase is building funds for replacement of a large vehicle 5 years from now.
Thank you.
Next, we have Vine Street, which is one of our 2 treatment plant budgets. Again, you look on the bottom of the program narrative on page 229, and that FTE is going up by a half. This is half of the new additional treatment operator position that I'm requesting. So it's split between here and the Albany Millersburg budget, which we'll get to in a second. Otherwise, this budget's pretty steady. Next, we have water distribution.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
Why did chemicals 61050 go up 35%?
Sure. We're changing coagulant at the Vine Street plant, so we add a chemical to help the dirt and solids settle out. And we're switching to a new chemical, so there'll be part of the year where we'll have both chemicals operating while we make that transition. So it's a little bit over this year.
Thank you.
Distribution, page 231. Let's see, also pretty static. They're not a whole lot new. I'll point out 65076, contractual maintenance. This is where we're currently paying for the asphalt and concrete repair with those water service lines that the contractor is doing. We'll be doing that in-house, so that number is dropping. It pays for a few other things as well, so it's still some funds in there.
I noticed for the target date for strategy, it says develop and implement a copper service line protection program.
Yes, so one of the things that we're doing, is adding protection to our copper lines because they're vulnerable to corrosion. Throughout town, we have areas that have pretty corrosive soils, and the copper lines and some of our ductile iron water mains are failing earlier than you would anticipate they would. So we have a program now where we test soil resistivity, and we put anodes on water mains, or we wrap the ductile iron in plastic to try to prevent the corrosion. We had various things. So the copper line protection program is adding an anode to copper lines to prevent the copper line from failing prematurely.
We have copper water lines, or this is service line to a customer service line?
Yes.
So we're putting an anode right next to the meter?
It's close to the meter. It has to be so far off away from the copper to draw the corrosion to itself. So we have a standard drawing.
Zincs, yeah.
Wherever it goes. That's where it goes. Next, AM water treatment plant, page 233. Again, there's an additional half FTE for the new operator position. The increase in chemicals on this page is because we have a couple of chemicals that some years we need to order 2 batches, and some years we need to order 3 batches, depending. And so next year we're anticipating we'll need to order 1 extra batch on a couple of chemicals. So that's why that's going up. It's just the way it goes sometimes. I'll also point out 66011, which is equipment replacement, is dropping significantly. What we had tried to do was budget for membrane replacement by setting some money away every year, and we just can't do that. The membrane replacement is, $500,000, and trying to save that much in, 5 years, it's $500,000 per cell. We have 4 cells, so we need $2 million. And trying to save that, we just can't do. So instead, we're paying for, going to be paying for those out of the capital fund. So that number has dropped down significantly. So for instance, if you look down at the bottom, capital equipment, that is a membrane, for the most part, that's a membrane purchase. We're paying for some of that out of equipment replacement funds that we have managed to save, and the rest will be paid out of capital. So $500,000 for 1 cell, we have 4 cells.
That seems to me that's a maintenance item. If it's, it's you do 25% per year.
Well, they last about 10 years.
Yeah.
So we started, I think, 2 years ago, and we had this, a discount that we had under a negotiated settlement. That's gone away. Now we're going out to the market. So we'll finish with our 4th cell next fiscal year, and then we won't be replacing membranes again for probably 6 more years.
Oh.
So it's,
Yeah.
Okay.
It just seems like it's a maintenance thing because, I don't question the number, I just, what you call it is the only thing.
It is I would call it a capital maintenance project. We have to spend a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
For things that last, 10 years. Yeah, it'd be the same as, if we needed to rebuild a reservoir or something like that. Okay. Oh, Jeff.
All right, so we're to water SDCI and our capital budget. It's on page 235. There are no project changes in these budgets from what we discussed in the CIP. And this is where you see the transfers out for the debt service budget for payments on the construction of the Albany water treatment plant. That debt service budget is on pages 239, 240. The payment schedule is on 239. Now, depending on how much development we see, it is possible that rates will have to start paying a portion of SDC's share of the debt service payment, similar to what we discussed for sewer. If it does happen, it will not be nearly the significant of an amount as it is on the sewer side. So it's something to be aware of, but not necessarily something to be too concerned about. It's not going to have a real meaningful impact to the amount of work that we're able to accomplish. Water capital budget is on page 241, 243. Again, here the projects are consistent with our CIP meeting. Water Eco Devo on page 244, 245. Similar to sewer, we already have the $500,000 reserve. That's our high-end target here, so we're not proposing any changes in this budget as well. The only project that is shown is a continuation of a project the council authorized to help a group of customers bring their backflow devices into compliance, and that helps protect the water system for all users. And that's something that's well underway already. And the last group of capital budgets for water are on pages 246 and 247. The North Albany water capital projects. This budget is used to fund capital projects outside of the UPB in North Albany, where the city took over the county service district water lines years ago. There are no projects proposed. When we do projects, well, let me step back. The money that's received into this budget is funded by an additional capital charge that those water users outside the UGB pay. So they pay an additional fee, it goes in here, that's like a savings account, builds up funds, and then we're able to go out and do replacement projects for those folks when they have enough funds. And that's exactly what we're doing here. We're just continuing to build reserves. There's next project that we plan to do out there is a substantial project. It's going to be a few years before we can actually get after it. Are there any questions on those capital budgets for the equipment replacement?
Okay, water equipment replacement. This is where we pay for mostly rolling stock. We accumulate the funds in a separate reserve fund, and then it's paid out here, or in this reserve fund, and then it's paid out. Sorry, it's getting late. So next year, we're going to place 2 vehicles, a service truck and a Traco, and those are the projects that are budgeted to be paid out here. Otherwise, we're just saving funds for future years. Oh, and the membranes. Yeah. Any questions on water before we move to stormwater? Okey dokey. Stormwater starts on page 250.
The downside of stormwater is really more budget.
More pages, more talking. The total stormwater budget is $2.19 million. As I mentioned, next fiscal year is the first full fiscal year with stormwater rates in place. And you can see that on this page on line 43305, stormwater service charges. Stormwater rates went into effect March 1st, as I mentioned. Expected to generate about $400,000 of revenue in this current fiscal year. It's not adequate to pay for all of the stormwater work, so you'll see a transfer from streets and sewer under the 2016-17 column that will still need to be made to pay for all the work that happened before March, essentially.
Which coincides with all that transfers that we read
Yes.
earlier.
So at this point, you're not, I'm looking at the narrative on page 251, not at this point indicating any FTEs at all for stormwater per se.
That's correct. So all those funny percentages that were in street maintenance and wastewater collections add up to this.
Okay.
So these FTEs here are not actual people that are stormwater people. This is work that was done by street maintenance employees or wastewater collection employees that adds up to the amount that's expended under the personnel lines on page 252.
So you lost me. So you have 173,000 in wages and salaries, but no FTEs shown.
There should be a replacement page that was handed out. I apologize deeply and profusely. There's a replacement program narrative page for stormwater operations.
Yes, I see
And
that.
we initially did not have any FTE shown because there aren't any assigned, and then in discussing it with finance, we did it this way. So,
The other way to look at it is the difference between an organizational chart and what's in the budget. And from an organizational chart perspective, we haven't added any FTE.
Right.
And we're using per council direction, some of the other resources that we have to try to fill the gap in stormwater and build that program slowly over time.
And I understand that, Jeff, you're just moving people around.
Yeah, I was
but
looking at the old
This answered
page,
the
not-
question, because
Sorry.
there was the salary, so when.
right. And the reason that the wages and salaries is dropping for next fiscal year is because we adjusted how much we were charging back to streets. So we adjusted the allocation of street sweeping that is a stormwater function, and so that brought that number down a little bit. Let's see, the other things that are increasing, so vehicle fuel charges and vehicle maintenance charges and equipment replacement charges, those are going up because we're actually spending more time with wastewater collections equipment in stormwater than we had previously budgeted. So we looked back at actual amounts of time spent, we apportioned the costs associated with those vehicles, and we put those in here. So collections is spending a decent amount of time in the stormwater system, and so that's why those numbers have gone up.
And the software license fees, that's just a prorated across
Right.
all the departments, I think.
Yes.
As an interesting side note, 5-6 years ago, we never should have been able to do this. And the work that the collections group has done on the wastewater system and over the last 5-6 years has just been extremely impressive. And they've got so efficient at the way they do business now that efficiency has created capacity to facilitate this.
Right. So it all ties back into those 5 years rate presentations and outlooks that we present to council. has allowed us to create enough capacity in wastewater collections to get that system sort of under control. We're bringing our pipe problems, we're improving our pipe condition. They're very good at what they do now, and that frees up their time. They can still accomplish that work, and they can do this work. And they're getting more efficient at this work. So they're able to spend a lot more time, not accomplish a lot more for the same amount of time as they learn how to do stormwater pipe cleaning and things, which is quite a bit different from wastewater pipe cleaning.
You don't see skunks in the lines or anything like that?
What's that,
You don't
skunks?
see skunks in the lines?
Not yet. But one of the pictures I included was a line they just cleaned in Periwinkle Creek, and there were tennis shoes and license plates and, big rocks.
Yeah, I
and
saw
all
that.
I mean, it's just crazy what you find.
Hard to send a pig down through that.
I didn't include the skunk picture. I thought that might be getting old. But never gets old, apparently. Let's see. Next, we have stormwater admin on page 253. And again, this pays for overarching stormwater support. Let's see. These charges, I point out Public Works admin charge and Public Works engineering charges are going up by a lot. This is associated with the permit we're expected to get this fall. There's going to be a lot of work put into writing our stormwater management plans and all of the work that goes with implementing a brand-new regulatory permit. So we'll rely a lot on, it could be legal fees. We'll talk about that later. We're going to be relying a lot on engineering and Jeff and me to help get through that process. So the other thing to note here is 66024, which is the utility billing program. So as I mentioned in water, utility billing costs went down, same in sewer. Here is where stormwater is paying their fair share of utility billing.
There were requirements on us may well be very much smaller.
I think that is all for me. Yeah.
All right, stormwater capital, page 55, 56. We were talking about just a moment ago, the direction from council was to start this program very small. And in the development of that, there was a decision made to not fund capital improvements with stormwater revenues right out of the chute. So we're going to build over a period of time. So there's no capital projects proposed in this budget. We know we have failed pipes out in the system that need to be replaced, but until funding plans developed and implemented, they'll remain as they are until we're into a sinkhole or something like that. Be part of our ongoing discussions on an annual basis about how far we want to take the program. And I think we're wise to follow the path that we're on, to go slow. We'll get there eventually, just like we have in the other utilities, and we'll get there. There is some pipe work that's completed as part of street projects, but those costs are not yet separated out. The street fund still pays for stormwater piping improvements, or stormwater quality improvements as part of the street project. That'll be another thing that we transition away from as we develop a more robust funding plan for stormwater activities. And then the last point that I wanted to make here is that unlike most other communities, we don't have stormwater SDCs. So you see in the other utility funds, how they all had associated SDC funds. In stormwater, we don't have that yet. We need to complete a stormwater master plan before we can do that, and we plan to get there on that as well. So we'll be proposing that at some point in the future, and we'll have that discussion with council when the time comes.
Okay, stormwater equipment replacement, so page 257 and 258. Similarly, we're just putting money away, so for instance, when we need to replace the wastewater collections backer truck, stormwater will pay its fair share of that equipment. Any questions on stormwater before we move to internal services? Okay. Oh wait, we're doing facilities replacement fund. I gotta go back. Page 259, but I have to turn back in my book. So this fund is where we accumulate money for capital maintenance or construction of new facilities in Public Works. Next year, we are planning to pay for some roof work that needs to be done out at Public Works Operations. You can see that on page 260. And this is also where we added the reserve line for the bus barn, new bus barn facility that's going to be transferred in from the Public Transit Fund. Any questions on that program? Okay, now we're going to go to internal services.
Start on page 261, with the 273. We have 6 different internal services programs. Programs provide services across several different funds and are supported by charging those funds for their services. The first 2 are ones that I manage, so I'll take those, which is Public Works Admin on page 261 and 62. This is the budget that contains all the admin staff for Public Works and the Community Development Departments. There's no major changes for those in this budget. Engineering services is on page 263 to 65. No major changes in this budget as well. The increase in software license and fee lines is related to our annual maintenance costs that we have to pay to have our CAD program for computer-aided drafting program supported, and they're to use. Any questions on those 2?
Okay, Ops Admin, page 266. This is my budget. It pays for things that affect all of operations. And again, I'll point out 63015, stormwater charge, that's new. Ops is a pretty big, has quite a bit of impervious surface, so $1,800 a year for stormwater, so we're paying our fair share. Next, we have water quality control, on page 268, 269. You'll note at the bottom of the program narrative that the FTE goes from 3 to 4. This is the new manager that's going to be assisting with as we shift around some regulatory compliance work. And that person will supervise pretreatment and the water quality technicians. There are costs associated with that, so the personnel services amount goes up as we add an additional FTE and a manager FTE. It's quite a bit of additional costs. Those costs are then charged back primarily to sewer. You can see where they charge back at the top of page
So,
269.
Chris, it seems like central service charges are increasing across the board, but here it dropped quite a bit.
So central service charges are based on, actually, let Stuart answer. I think they look back a year. Are they looking back a year? So next year's central service charges are looking back at the most recent complete full year. And they're based on number of FTE and total program budget. So in previous years, this program budget was, 49,000, 67,000. Next year, so anyway, so the number went down as the total budget went down. It might rise next year if they raise it for the additional FTE. It's finance. They just tell us what we pay.
Thank you.
Chris,
Sounds like voodoo.
What kind of contractual services are you using for the admin stuff and something like that?
On central services?
Yeah, I think that's where I'm at.
Oh, contraction services. Those pay for temporary employees if we hire temps for anything. We also, we might hire, what do we do with that? We provide some support to, for instance, the California Watershed Council. We partner with them a lot on outreach and education events, and that is paid out of that line. So we pay them some money. They have the education specialist, and then we work together for programs. So things of that sort where we're contracting with other businesses or groups. Let's see. Next is Jeff Blaine.
This is my last one, for the utility billing budget on pages 270, 271. Our utility billing team manages over 19,000 accounts. Fortunately, our supervisor there was sick today, so she wasn't able to be here tonight, but Betty really does a good job with that group and her staff. It's not always a fun and rewarding job. There's a lot of conflict associated with it. With people upset for various reasons, often not the fault of anyone that's taking the brunt of the blow. So not a lot of kudos for that job. Very difficult job to do it, but they do a very, very good job with their responsibilities, and their responsibilities increased significantly this last year with the implementation of the stormwater program. They did a fantastic job of getting that in place, operating smoothly, being prepared as a group to answer inquiries from a number of customers. And they just really, really took that on with a good attitude and worked real hard to make sure that they could address concerns and meet people's needs efficiently.
And,
Question. What's the smallest bill that we make? Meaning with one of our, there's a relationship between how much something costs to get it out the door and what we get back when the customer pays the bill?
I may be totally wrong on this, but I'll say it anyway, so you can correct me. I think the cost to send out a bill is something like 35 cents or something like that per bill. So the cost to send out a bill is as much. The smallest bill on the stormwater side is, $6.56.
624, I believe, for the tier one.
For tier one. Oh, yeah, 50 cents. And some of those customers that are new customers that don't also have a water and sewer bill associated with them, we've had conversations with a number of them that said, what can we do? Because I don't really want to write a check for $6 come on 6 every week. And so there's different people's situations have dictated different approaches, but many people are just paying a year's worth of payments at one time. They get credit on their account. They just don't send it in for another year.
Yeah. But 35 cents is, well, it costs more than that to send it.
That's just the mailing charge.
Yeah.
Oh, when you go and do it, take the software vendor.
It's all pending bill, per bill.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, these folks do a good job. You know, that water leak I spoke of earlier, they mitigated one of the bills to my wife's satisfaction, so.
Well, then it's okay.
Happy wife, happy life.
That's right.
That's right.
Okay, the next program is Facilities and Maintenance Engineering on page 272, 273. This program touches virtually every public works operations program that we have. They provide mechanical, electrical, we have a pump specialist, although everyone works on pumps, all the mechanics. We have the SCADA programming group is in this group, which is a fantastic group, very, very technically skilled. We have the asset management group, where we kind of have a computerized maintenance management system, and that group tracks all of our assets. It sends out scheduled maintenance reminders and tracks all of the maintenance on all of our assets that are in the computer system. And it's just a critical group. I can't express how important they are to the department. So relatively unchanged from the current year till next fiscal year on this group. There's not a whole lot of increases. This is another group that charges back, as all of these 705 programs do, and you can see where they're charging up above. Their charges vary from year to year. As I mentioned, one year they may be needing to do quite a bit more water work than sewer work, or vice versa. So they predict that out and have it scheduled and charge back over the year as it happens.
Chris, item 43817 streets?
Yes.
Why did that jump so much?
So was it you that pointed out the street paying for facilities engineering? Back in the street maintenance budget, we had a large charge, or street admin, for a facilities engineering charge, and I said,
Yes. This
they're
is
doing
where-
quite a bit more
Okay.
asset management of street assets. This is that chargeback to
Okay.
streets. So that's it for that budget. We are almost done. Now we go into grants, which start on page 274. And I have to
Such a small budget. Such a small.
flip back here. 1 second. Okay. So we have only a couple of programs that are in the grant fund. The FAA capital grant on page 275. This is where if we receive any FAA grant funds, it comes into this program. We also this year successfully applied for an Oregon Department of Aviation grant. That hasn't come to the council yet because they haven't gotten the grant documents written, but we are anticipating receiving those funds in the next fiscal year. And that grant will offset our local match required for the FAA grant. FAA grants are 90% federal, 10% local. So we applied for 10% of the, or 90% of the 10%, and that's where that money is. The projects that we're working on at the airport are in the airport master plan, so we're doing some taxiway connectors, and the goal is to create displaced threshold, which creates a longer usable runway surface for the airport. It's been a long goal of the airport group to be able to get a little more powerful aircraft in, so this is continuing steps towards that goal. The other grant fund that we have is Title 19 grants. Title 19 is a program where we can be reimbursed for the non-medical, I always have to think about this, non-medical rides we provide to Medicare clients. So that is exactly what it says. So if there's a person who's eligible for Medicare, who's a Caller Ride client, and we take them to a non-medical destination, they want to go play cards or they, something else, then we can be reimbursed for the cost of that ride. It fluctuates wildly depending on how many Medicare eligible clients we have, how many non-medical rides they take, et cetera. So it's just a tiny amount. It's not allowed to be paid for out of the paratransit budget. It has to be a separate fund. So that's why it's over here. Tiny program, but useful. And that is it for Public Works. Are there any overarching questions, any lingering questions we haven't already answered?
Thank you all for your presentations.
Thank you.
Do we have time for the library?
No.
Yes.
Is that okay?
No?
You got 4 minutes.
Can you do it in 4 minutes? Do it quickly.
Thank you.
Well, who makes that decision?
Yes, thank you very much for your patience and fitting us in here. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight, especially the new faces. I look forward to seeing you more. I thank you for your good work. I thank our support groups, Colleen, representing the Friends of the Library, Mr. Olson representing the Albany Public Library Foundation, and in the audience, one of our library board members. We have a lot of volunteers as well, like Parks, and a great staff, and couldn't do without them and the support groups, so fantastic. It's awesome to follow Public Works. I just did a little math. I think maybe they spend almost $250,000 a day. We spend about $700-800 a day. So I think this presentation, if I can find my materials, I'm going to cut it short, and to include, I actually brought some PowerPoints with me by way of some cards from patrons, and we get a lot of these. So a couple of PowerPoints to all the staff at the library. Thanks for all you do, for encouraging literacy and a love of reading, for helping our community to have lifelong learning, for creating a safe space for our children, and for all the answers to questions. Yeah, that's good. And from a little one to all, thank you for making me feel so loved. And last but not least, we have a suggestion box, and this was tucked into the suggestion box in the kids' room. I've hidden money somewhere in the library, misspelled library, so I might not even need this budget if I find that money. I'm going to be looking for that very anxiously, and our budget is on pages 277 to 87, so again, 100 pages to 10 pages, and I think we can focus on pages 278 and 279, where the bulk of the activity is. The budget's pretty similar to last year. I'm thankful to the HR department with our benefits. You see in all the departments, the cost of benefits has gone down, and that allows us to do more work. Have a little bit more money to spend. We've added 11 hours split between 3 people, so you probably didn't even notice that, but we're proposing that small increase, and you see that on page 278 down the bottom, 20.93 to 21.20. Wanted to highlight a couple of things. While they look innocuous, and my colleagues behind me make fun of me that I just sort of cut and paste these things each year, but I want to just spell out a couple of things. Great neighborhoods collaborate with GAPS to improve access to library services. You may have read and heard we've been working on a project whereby student ID cards now function as library cards, and so it took a while to get going, working with multiple jurisdictions, but as of tonight, more or less 5,700 kids, or about 60% of GAP students, have been using that and checked out about 4,000 items. So we're going to keep an eye on that. This is the first library in Oregon doing it, but it is a trend in the country. If you are interested, check out Nashville Public Library. That's where I'd like to see us go, and the data for success across all levels of kids who have access to robust libraries and staff is tremendous. Of course, the best way to thrive in a partnership with the schools is if the schools will actually fund the libraries, actually pay for books and put school media specialists in the libraries. They're struggling with that. That's the best route, but in lieu of that. So we're doing that, and of course, we collaborate with them all the time, year in, year out, all kinds of different ways, but the student ID library card is a new one. And also federal E-rate discounts. We basically, in a nutshell, by applying for those and doing the paperwork for our IT, some of our IT equipment, we're paying 40 cents on the dollar for equipment we were going to buy. So that's good, and we spent a good chunk of change this year, again, 40 cents on the dollar. And then, the Lynn County Libraries, as you know, SCIO, you may not know, SCIO, Harrisburg, Lebanon, Sweet Home, Lynn Benton, and Albany Public Library share the database. So there's been savings each year for several years now, and all the libraries in the county are rising. It's not really a consortium, but I call it a consortive. We're building. Someday when there's some political will, and we really want to go for it, all that infrastructure is going to be in place. And so that's what a couple of those things are all about on the strategies and actions. Over on page 279.
Ed?
Yes, please.
Before you get into the numbers, are you partnering with folks running the Dolly Parton project?
I was going to mention that briefly. I know my 4 minutes are up, but Yeah, Greg Rowe and I actually started that together, and so, yeah, strategically, we got that going, and you've read about it in the newspaper, and I think it's up to maybe, I'm going to round up generously, but 30,000 books have been given out to 3,000 kids, and our goal is to see their tests and their readiness for kindergarten improve by 30%, and we're working with the schools, developing some tests and ways to measure the effectiveness of kids. And as you would imagine, kids are happy, siblings are jealous, parents are happy, you know, where's my book? I want a book, you know. And so it's a good thing. So we are very strategically, that's a great community success story. Greg Rowe, I've never seen him so excited about a project. You know, several Rotary clubs, United Way, the library, Coastal Farms.
Yeah.
It's good. And so, yes, that's a good program success story, and it's not in here. So for the bulk of our budget, on page 279, I'm happy to say midway down there for the materials, you know, again, I say this every year, surprisingly, people don't come in the library to see me. They come in, you know, for the materials, for the programs. We have, you know, we have over 500 programs a year. But we're getting now, when you add those line items for 61375 and 76 with our endowments, we're, I think this year proposing 12% or so of our budget for materials, and that meets our goal. That is the ultimate goal from my perspective. The more, you know, the more material, more relevant, more timely, more useful material that we can have for folks, the more successful we're going to be. So that's a highlight, I think, of this proposal. Everything else is pretty much ebbs and flows. You might have some questions. Water service. I love my stormwater utility is all I can say about that. But that's right. So some new folks might have some questions about the line items for the library. I'll take questions for page 279 if you have any.
What's in your contractual services, 60101?
Yes. You know, 75% of that is janitorial. And we use some temps to fill in staff shortages, courier service, copier charges. That's $100K right there. So, and that moves and fluctuates according to, you know, what our staffing needs are, but the bulk of that is janitorial. And we continue to the smaller grants. Some of those, the first one there on page, what is that?
281.
Yeah, that, we're just letting that sit, you know, accruing that $70 a year, you know, and about 2050 we'll spend something out of there. We're just constrained with the interest earnings there. Manila on page 280, 283, we do get to buy, you know, a handful of books, as you can see, designated sci-tech, education, religion. So, as our board member in the back will attest, it's fun to review the list each month of, in those categories that are listed on page 282, religious, educational, and sci-tech.
Ed,
Yes, sir.
Where does the auction results show up?
The, Ray is referring to the Friends of the Library's fundraiser called Uncorked. I invite you to it. I think we'll be starting, the 5th year, Colleen, next year? And that's all on the Friends of the Library books. But if you'll turn the page, that's a good question, Ray, to a couple of pages to 286. You can see miscellaneous revenue, 47012. Some of that shows up there. We might request some funds from the Friends for some books, for a project, for some equipment. So but the money sits with the Friends of the Library,
all right, okay.
and their budget and all of their practices, and, yeah. So if you're on page 286, and I'll finish right here. Again, we're thankful for this endowment. It's a $2 million endowment, the Oregon Community Foundation. And we're down the bottom, for our expenditures, you can see over the years, they've jumped from here to there according to if we need to spend more money for books because of the budget. Now we're able to actually do some more creative things. I think this is where we would support the Dolly Parton Imagination Library from this fund. And then the state library grant, lastly, in the grants, that's allocated by the state, by the feds, so you'd want to be up in arms with, the threat to cut IMLS, Institute for Museum and Library Services, because the money that comes to the states comes via that, and if current administration cuts that, this, $8,000 to $10,000 a year would likely go away, and it's allocated per how many youth from 0 to, I want to say, 17 do you have in your community, and then there's a formula. So that wasn't 4 minutes, but that's what we're doing. In this current cultural climate, where we're making adjectives great again, I want to say that, the library's fantastic. It's the best. It's great.
Huge.
Come and see us.
It's huge.
It's huge. Love it.
You have the best books.
I do have a question.
Yes, sir, please.
Besides the trusts and city funds, do you get any money from the school district or Lebanon or Sweet Home or anybody else?
School district, absolutely not. The other entities, as far as our consortive, each of them pays their prorated share for the upkeep of the software system, share the courier costs that we're doing, but we will share, when the summer reading programs that are almost upon us, if a performer comes to town or the valley, we can make an economical partnership and get more, programs and bang for the buck there. But directly, no, aside from the sharing of the software system and some of those things. We do have a resource coordinator on staff, and you may have noticed in the library there's 100 book bags. If you have a book club or somebody has one, please don't let them buy books. Come to the library. So there's 100 bags full of 12 to 15 books that you can check out. Those are all grant funded. So we have someone writing smaller grants, but what are you getting at there?
What I'm getting at is we are sharing stuff, and that's great.
Yep.
But it's folks in Albany paying for it. And, I guess I would ask the city to step, or if we're helping GAPS. Okay, great, let GAPS help put some of the bill. Let Sweet Home or Lebanon or whomsoever else is using the facilities help foot some of the bill for it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think,
it's people in Albany helping somebody in Sweet Home learning how to read, and, there's nothing wrong with people helping each other, but Sweet Home ought to be helping their folks pay for that.
It's a really good point. And when we should really have a Mid-Valley system. There should be one library card for, from Salem to LC or whatever. But, so if you're looking for a book right now and you search our catalog, you can drop down to all 6 of those libraries, and it may be that our copies checked out of a series. So there's a lot of borrowing, a lot of sharing, granted, the larger libraries are usually lending the most, but I've seen, come by and the courier bags going out to those 5 other libraries, that's a pretty decent traffic in going back and forth. But what I was going to say, Rich, and it's a good point, is with the data we have now, working together with these libraries and sharing resources and software, I think we're getting close to sitting down with the county and, to your point, having that conversation. And I don't need $1 million, but I'll take some money. Yeah, it's a good point. Thank you.
And I have a question. On 278, you list the visitors to the library. How are you able to monitor that?
What am I listing?
Pardon?
What did I list?
The visitors to the library each year. How are you able to monitor how many thousands come in?
That's what I do every day. I have a clicker.
Sure you do.
No, we have security gates that, unlike Corvallis, we actually plug them in when they had them. They don't anymore, but and they have counters built. Both at the Carnegie Library. We have 2 libraries, 50,000 square feet of library services.
So that number includes both libraries?
Yeah,
Okay.
and it's a real number.
Yeah.
The system goes down, or when we're close, we do extrapolate a little bit when the thing isn't working.
Oh.
But that's a real number measured by our security gates. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
Thank you.
Maybe I'm going to show my white hairs here, but is there such a thing as a bookmobile anymore?
There are some out and about. Corvallis, Benton County has one. We do not, but it's sort of depending on like Eastern Oregon, that system has them, depending on the geography. Yeah. And they are I understand the Corvallis, Benton County one is very, very popular, and so, yeah. Wow. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for your work.
Thank you for your presentation. Okay, do we have any other business? Okay, our next meeting date will be next Thursday, the 11th of May. We'll continue on, and in the meantime, we'll adjourn till then.